All right, it's Sunday, May 23rd, 2021. I'm Steven Sersky. Thank you for joining me. This is episode number 25 of my podcast. And today I have my first returning guest today. It's going to be Denny Goin, who the last time we talked, he was in the United States just before the United States election. After having lived in China for several years, he was looking to get out of the States again and make his way back to Asia. Now, since then, he has left, and I'll let you find out where he's stationed right now, but let's just say it's not in the States anymore, and it's not China either. One of these grand adventurers, I guess you could say. I wonder if he'll ever write a book about something like this. But he is on the hunt, on the prowl for a visa, of all things, but also in terms of business ventures around the world. So today I did have the chance to talk to him, and we talked about a lot of different things. There are a few parts where I know people might be put off by a little bit of the political discussion that goes on. I encourage you to kind of push through it, because I do sort of help Denny move away from some of those points, because he does like to go back to it several times. But other than that, very productive, very informative conversation about what it's like to travel now in the time of the coronavirus, and what it's like to travel in search of other business ventures. So it's been good. It was a good conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. And this is Denny Goin. DIG has entered the waiting room. Admit. You look as if you don't have your headphones on properly, sir.
I have one ear off so that I can hear how loud I am.
You don't have to worry about it. There's a volume control in Zoom, isn't there? I mean, it takes care of itself.
Well, I'm more worried about disturbing other people, my neighbors.
Real? How many other neighbors do you have?
I don't know. I've only been in this place for about 21 hours. I didn't get a lot of opportunity to look around. I mean, yesterday I vomited. So, I didn't exactly have fun or go out very much. Okay. So, and then it's only 10:30 in the morning.
Right. So, I mean, every message that you've sent me basically in the last 6 months has contained some reference to vomiting. Honestly, that's probably the most common theme, other than like you traveling. It's travel and vomit. Those are the two themes of our messages
Well,
lately.
okay. So certainly this month, the problem was 3 weeks ago, I vomited and I had a really terrible day, May 1st. Oh,
Yeah.
it was bad. And then like yesterday, but I didn't have any problems with Korea with the food or Dubai. It was just happenstance. And I also, unfortunately, I've apparently developed an allergic reaction. I had no problems with peanuts. Okay, no problems at all for the first 37 years of my life. But both times before I had these vomiting sprees, I had peanuts. And
Yeah.
the first time I wasn't sure because I had other things after I'd had the peanuts. So I didn't know what the cause was. But yesterday that was the link. It was the same problems with my stomach, gas, and then later diarrhea, and then vomiting. And when I looked at what I was vomiting, it was clearly peanut. So I'm fairly sure I just developed it, unfortunately.
So how closely did you examine your vomit?
Well, the toilets aren't exactly that deep now. Well, certainly I didn't put my head in it. I could see pieces of peanut fragment both times when I was in Dubai and then also here in Tbilisi.
All right.
It's sad.
Well, did you feel around at all? Did you do that? Did you get a sense of the texture?
Have you vomited before? It wasn't like it was exactly that thick. And there's acid and other gastric juices with it. So it's fairly clear and easy to see. It wasn't like it was green. It
Uh,
was peanut colored.
well, I haven't puked in a very long time, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm very happy about that. But I have seen other people vomiting. Yes, 2 days ago when I was leaving my apartment, I I got out of the elevator and I saw two other guys, one guy with a bike and another guy, I guess, was patting him on the back, and there was a pile of puke right there. I'm like, I just missed the episode, and I'm thankful that I missed it, because had I been there, I've been like, oh yeah, he just puked in my compound, in my elevator compound, right? Thanks, buddy.
Not pleasant.
Love it, love it. Which one there? I think that's better. Anyway, yeah. Well, so then, so where are you now?
So I am very close to the Parliament building here in Tbilisi, Georgia. Apparently, it's the center of the city.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just look for places that are relatively inexpensive, and I use Airbnb. Okay, for all of this time, I've been using Airbnb to find places. So I just look for whatever accommodations. I look through the pictures, see if it has what I need, and if I understand that the place is quiet enough. So I look at the reviews, and then I go there. Right, if it meets my price needs. So, it's the heart of the city or on the outskirts, I wouldn't care. But I've just happened in Seoul and in Tbilisi. Apparently, I wound up in very popular places by accident.
I don't think that's by accident. I think that if you have those criteria, you're going to end up in the popular places. But okay, so then what's your budget? Like, what are you spending per night? Or what have you spent per night?
Okay, so like the first time I was in Korea, all right, back from November to the end of January, it was the place where I was staying was about $180 or $190 a month.
Okay.
Now, to be certain, okay, I mean it was only maybe one, so it was only 1.5 by 2 meters maybe.
Yeah.
But it had a full bed, it had a refrigerator, it had a television if I wanted it. Also on the grounds, right, there were other rooms like this. You had free kimchi and free rice. There was a proper kitchen for cooking. There was high-speed internet, reliable high-speed broadband, and also Wi-Fi. There was a router in your room.
Yeah.
And that wasn't bad. And that type of thing seems to be common there. They do that for a lot of university students, and also for poorer people from the countryside who wind up moving to the city to do menial labor.
Well, like the migrant laborers that you see all over Beijing, basically, right? It's the same thing, except here, like what they do is they actually give them housing if they're employed by one of the state enterprises. They get housing on the work site, basically, which is all those like little ramshackle places that you see, which are like bare minimum sort of living standards sort of thing. It's not like, other compounds that foreigners live in and stuff like that.
Sure. And to give you an idea, I saw a lot of ads for labor, looking for laborers on Craigslist, even though it was in English, which surprised me. And it seems like the going rate for foreign labor is about $100 a day. But to be clear, that means you're working 12 or 13 hours, 6 or 7 days a week.
So you said for foreign labor or for menial labor?
Well, in this case, I'm talking about Craigslist, both.
Right. Okay.
Right. I don't know how much. So I'm just giving an idea. If they're willing to pay that much for a foreigner to do menial labor, I'm not sure how much they would offer to the Koreans.
Yeah, but
right.
In this case, you do also have to like, what do they mean by foreigners? It means like the North Koreans, or it means like the Chinese who cross the border, or the Japanese.
Well, the ads were written in English. See, the ads were written in English, so I imagine it wasn't going to be North Koreans. I don't know who.
Yeah, I don't know. What's the state of the English industry in North Korea?
Yeah, exactly. In Dubai, in Dubai, what I saw ads for on Craigslist, but then also when I was in Dubai, I would see postings everywhere. Now, see, it's always fun living in other places where English is the predominant language, but nobody speaks it as a native language, because then how they use English gets to be a lot of fun.
Okay.
And it's interesting listening to how, so when we're talking about things like register, like how formal your language is, in some ways, how they're speaking to one another is even less formal than how Americans might be speaking. All right, for many times, I would be speaking with an Indian gentleman or a Pakistani gentleman as an example,
Hmm.
and I would be standing right next to him, and he would be talking to somebody else, and he would keep on referring to me as this guy, or this fella. But then with the Filipinos, on the flip side, right, you're just in a store doing something, and they might refer to you as boss or boss man. And so, they all get along, right? They're all functioning, society's functioning fairly well. No one's getting into fights. They're civil, they're happy, they make friends with one another. So it makes me question, all of our training with the IELTS and showing expertise in language. The thing I wonder about is, look, they're able to use English very well to do whatever they need in their work life and in their social life. How are they not experts, at least within what they need to know, right? They would be considered band 5 or band 6, but
Right, but I mean, I don't think you, or anybody, except for maybe the people who take those tests, would be sort of aware of just how, I don't want to say broken that system is. I mean, standardized testing gets shit on in every language that it exists. It's just that with the English ones, they're the most predominant. They also haven't changed very much at all. So it's uh, like they're only now revising the Chinese standardized test, the HSK stuff. So, and we were talking about this. I sent you a couple messages about that. Like, I just did my HSK4 test. Now, they haven't changed it yet. They will at the end of the year. They're going to trial a change in the upper levels. So, what would become levels 7, 8, 9. So it's like 6 right now, maybe 5, upper 5, and then 6. So those are going to be trialed at the end of the year. Um, at the point that I'm at right now with my studies, that I'm going from HSK4 to HSK5, this changeover probably won't hit me as hard as it's someone who's like is like about to graduate or needs HSK3 or 4 to graduate from a university here, and they're like, "Oh my god, I have to learn so much more," or they want to come to China and work and they have to prove proficiency or something. That's where it's going to get more difficult. But for me, I mean, I've sort of settled into the fact that like it's going to take me, like, I've already started the HSK5 stuff anyway, right? So I'm in terms of vocabulary, I'm working on that. The next big jump is going to be accuracy in terms of grammatical structures, and then also the new characters, which is doesn't mean words that are made up of characters that I know, right? Which is one of the most bizarre things of the Chinese language that makes it very difficult and is very different from the alphabetic languages that we know. But I mean, you're in Georgia right now, so you're in the place that is speaking Russian. I'm also studying Russian, but you've been in Dubai. Dubai, even, I think Arabic. They even have like an alphabet of sorts. Hebrew as well too. But these pictographic languages, and Chinese is one of those unique languages where it's like you need. I found at HSK4 that's 1,200 characters. 1,200 characters that I
Yeah, yeah,
can
yeah, I know.
finally understand. I can read, but not always understand what I'm reading. So I'll know the sound of the character. I'll know what it could mean, but I won't know, like, if there's two or three or four characters together, especially. I won't know what that word means. So I mean, it's but you're able to start piecing it together at that point. HSK3, you can't really do that very well. You start thinking you can, but you can't.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
hear you.
but to get back to like the whole standard argument, like the HSK is fine. So the last time they redid it was 2012, and they're redoing it now. Now, when is the last time you could say that a standardized test in English has been overhauled?
Well, I mean, I know,
Years.
yeah, I know that the years ago that with the IELTS is originally set up so that the candidate would actually ask the examiner questions. Okay, can
Oh,
you imagine?
that was 15 years ago or so.
And then also, apparently, at some point in time, at least they trial ran, if not actually fully implemented, a system where you would have two examiners in the room, one who was asking the questions, the other one who would actually be live assessing.
Right.
which makes sense. Okay, it makes sense, and it's a lot easier, right? Instead of us going back and listening to the recording again.
Hmm.
So I could see why that might be a good thing, but then it's also more expensive for the British Council or for the Australian group. I can't remember their name offhand.
IDP.
Right, IDP.
Right. So okay,
Yeah.
actually, this was actually something I was going to talk to you about because we have heard in our employment and other ventures and in the ESL industry, there's a lot of criticism towards these standardized tests. And my criticism has always been like you have a standardized test in the age of the internet, which doesn't. I mean, it's kids are able to go on the internet and find the answers within, so the test first takes place in, time zone X, and then the answers are up on time zone Y by the end of the hour sort of thing, right? So what would your solution be to a language proficiency test, given that you've traveled to these places and you're going, they know English, but they're not considered experts?
So what I believe is that, and to some extent, this is already done. I mean, I don't know what it is like in Canada or in the British Kingdom or Australia, but like when I went to college in the United States, certainly students would take the TOEFL before coming to America, but then most of the universities also have their own test for the
Hmm.
students. And this is why I really dislike that system, because what would happen is the student maybe would earn a high enough a score on the TOEFL, but then they come and they take the entrance English exam and they're told, oh, well, actually, it's not good enough. So you can't start your classes yet. But you can enter this special program, and only for
Oh
ten or
yeah.
$20,000
Right,
more.
but that's a money scam that they've got going
Oh,
on.
certainly.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think what will eventually happen is I think that there will be a market for people who are professionally trained as examiners as such, well, or professional assessors.
Hmm.
Okay, more like an individual professional assessor. And a university will have guidelines and will have specific questions or things to search for, right? Because really what we need to know is, do they have the ability to do X, Y, or Z? And that's why, for example, I think that the A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2 system makes more sense,
Yeah.
right? Because it says, okay, this person can do this in that language, right? Whether it be speaking or writing.
Right.
And I think that is better than, and I think in the future, that's where it's going. And I would have to think IELTS will eventually have to go that way. I mean, you can go on the internet and you can find places where it says, okay, for example, C2 is band 9, maybe 8.5 or 9, and they have it broken down. But that's not really what we're looking for. Like, are you able to show empathy or sympathy at an appropriate level? Are you able to make a proper request when you go to the cleaners? Are you able to do this? Are you able to do that? And so universities can create a list and look for targeted language, targeted vocabulary, or targeted grammar structures also.
Yeah.
I think that may be the future. I don't think this whole general standardized test is going to function as well going forward, but we'll see.
So,
We'll see.
because right now since I'm studying Russian, and I told my teacher, my goal was to hit, I get C2, no, C1. What's the lower level? C1 within a year.
C1's lower. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm good. My goal would be to be C1 by April of 2022. Now,
Mm-hmm.
most people would be like, okay, so either you're proficient or you have high ambitions. Which, I mean, I studied Ukrainian growing up, so there's a whole chunk. And in researching how many hours it takes, like ballpark, to get to that point, because they also publish the same thing for Chinese, like how many classroom hours should you take, would most people need to get to a certain level? And I can't remember. It was like 800 classroom hours or something to get to C1. But I mean, if I sort of take in the fact that I know the alphabet, I know the sounds, so I know the a lot of the words are borrowed from other languages anyway. So it's not so much all of like the menial lower end stuff that I have to work on. It's more pronunciation, focusing, like being able to actually speak, grammatical, doing it grammatically correctly. Like the concept of conjugations is not foreign to me, but getting those conjugations and declensions right
Yeah.
As my Russian teacher reminds me every time I speak, you got it wrong. You know the declension. You know it. We went through it. I'm like, I know we went through it, but I can't remember. But yeah, so to get to C1, uh, I calculated it was going to take me like 13 hours per week or something over 56 over 52 weeks or over 60 weeks to
Yeah,
get to
that's
the
doable.
point. It is, except when like I also have to work or something like that. Apparently, that's why I'm in China. But then also, I'm studying Chinese, and that requires X number of hours. So it did sort of cross my mind. Like, am I pushing myself too much in this? But I go again, Russian. When I'm dealing with Russian, and it seemed like if I ever encounter Ukrainian, it's not like a brick wall that I'm running into. It's actually more of like a breath of fresh air. I'm not gonna lie, compared to Chinese, where my latest description of what the language is like for me at this point is that everything is a textbook. Like everything I pick up, like a notice, a post-it on the wall, like, just about the elevator maintenance or whatever. Like meow was the latest thing, the injection, the virus vaccination thing. Like in another book, everything is a textbook to me. I mean, I can read it, but then I don't understand it. So I'm going back to reading the dictionary, whereas Russian isn't always like that. I mean, it could be a lot better, and I'm certainly getting better, but yeah, in terms of what you're saying with application and being able to function at certain levels, Russian follows that European framework with the different levels. That's why I say C1. And you're right. I mean, with the Chinese system, with the six levels so far, and they're moving up to a 9 level system that's kind of mirroring what IELTS does. But TOEFL does it. TOEFL doesn't, and IELTS doesn't. They don't. They let you be whoever and whatever you can be, but there's no requirements. So if you only need to get into a university, and so that's like I don't even know what band level you need for most levels. Like a TOEFL would be like 90 or something or 75, like bare minimum sort of thing. But so okay, so that means that you can get by passport, customs, you can get through the airport, you can probably get a taxi. But if anyone asks you a question outside of those standardized situations, you're probably not going to function very well, right? So, I mean, yeah, English tests haven't done it yet, whereas the European languages, they've done it. Chinese has done it. I don't know, has Arabic done it? I'm not sure what Arabic goes by for their languages.
So there is a debate as to within for Arabic. Okay, I can only talk in generalities. I never looked into it. The problem with Arabic is there are, well, all right, you're talking about from Morocco
Hmm.
all the way to Oman, and as far south, natively speaking, as maybe like Nigeria. And so you have lots of different accents and a lot of different even uses of grammar and pronunciation, more so than in English, a lot more than in English. So there are two standard forms of Arabic, basically. There's MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, which is what you would find like in the Gulf countries.
Right.
But then on the flip side, and what most people are familiar with is Egyptian, because the Egyptians are the ones who had a freer country and more freedom of media. And so a lot of the movies, a lot of the newspapers, the magazines, right? You want scantily clad women or other things like that. Certainly Egypt, definitely not the Gulf. And
Okay.
so the question becomes, all right, do you want to follow what the Gulf uses, or do you want to follow what the normal person does? Now, most people go through the MSA, right?
Okay.
Modern Standard Arabic. So they will have a dialect that is acceptable in Saudi Arabia. I don't know how different it is between, say, for example, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. I met some Egyptians while I was in Dubai, and they told me that to be certain, there were certainly clear differences between the Emirates, the local Emirati people, which I would have to think is Gulf English. Um, there are some words and other things where it's just really different from how they would normally speak in Egypt. To what extent that is more just common phrases or lingo to that country,
Yeah.
I don't know. We didn't talk about it that deeply. Hebrew, So Hebrew, as you know, modern Hebrew is an invented language. All right, let's call it what it is, and it is different. Well, it is
Well, does
because
anyone
basically,
disagree with that? Or I mean, when you say it, well, let's call it what it is. I mean, who's ever
well,
said like, no, it's not?
well, so the problem gets to be there are a lot of people who now, especially with the recent conflict going on, they question whether the Jewish people, Hebrew, all of that is even appropriately identified as being with the Middle East.
Really?
I mean, that there. Oh, that's quite common. That a lot of people say, maybe these people had blood with people who were here 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So what? And it's not exactly that simple, and it actually wasn't that long ago, but that's a different thing. But suffice it to say, with Hebrew, there aren't so many people. It's only been around, the modern Hebrew, only 150 years, and it's distinct from the Hebrew that you would read in the Old Testament. All
Yeah.
right.
Okay. What? How big is the difference?
So, so like the Quran, for example, all right, it will have the vowels as well. All right, it'll have all the vowel sounds. And so, for example, if you've ever had Arab students, they can have a very difficult time spelling their name correctly or words, and they screw up the vowels, not the consonant sounds. And that's why modern Arabic doesn't use them. Similar with Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, the vowel sounds aren't written. You have to know where they are.
Okay.
However, you read the holy texts, the vowels are there. Also, again, it goes back to things like register. I mean, if you read the older New Testament, all right, the King James Version of the Bible, okay, right? We don't speak that way anymore, right? There
Did
are,
anyone speak that way? No.
well,
And
okay.
I'll say no. And the reason why I say no is because it was written and they were being very formal in their writing. Now, this goes back to like how the Bible was written in the first place, the whole like the presentation of the written word. The same thing happens in classics when people talk about how people actually spoke. And there's differences between how the comedic or the dramatic writers in ancient Athens and like how someone like Thucydides wrote. I mean, one was very formal and the other one was like gutter talk, basically.
Okay, to be
Gutter talk
certain,
for the stage, I should say.
I read the frogs. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Okay, to be certain, that's right. We don't know to what extent what we understand about the past to be completely accurate. Now, I'm not saying that the people who are writing it down were necessarily lying, but I mean, you're a historian, you studied historiography. And what's really important, for example, is who is writing down what was happening at the time.
Yes,
Right?
context.
They may not be lying, but for example, when Chinese tell me, oh, we have these sources from 2,500, 3,000 years ago detailing how the normal person lived, and they were all very happy enjoying their work. And I said,
Were they?
these were highly educated people who worked for the king. Do you think they actually went out and lived with the peasants? Probably not. I'm not saying they're lying, but what I am saying is they weren't going to be exposed very much. And do you think the peasantry were going to come up to the king and say, screw you? No.
No, that's like someone walking up to the president and saying, well, no, actually, that's today you can do that. On Twitter, you can go ahead and scream, screw you to the president. And in the glorious states of America, and, even in Canada, you can call down your leader in front of everybody and people cheer you on, and the leader has to take it. Other countries, you can't do that, or you get disappeared or shot. I mean, let's call it how it is, basically. But I mean, that is sort of the freedom of the modern world, and especially like the last time we talked about how the United States is basically an experiment, and this is an experiment. It's a current, modern, evolving experiment. How does someone lead a group of people? Such a diverse group of people that has a massive history behind it, and it doesn't have to be a long history, 200, 300 years. How do you all get them agreeing on like what's socially accept what can we all do to make life better for people while still being a cohesive whole? And like that would be like the current experiment with social media in the United States.
Yes.
I mean, that's a massive digression from like the standardized testing that we were talking about before. But I mean, getting back to like the whole modern Hebrew and modern Arabic. So I mean, with those changes, like they're still able to talk about proficiency in those languages. Does Hebrew have a standardized test? Like, if I were to sign up for Hebrew courses, like, could I like have a target basically?
So certainly there is Hebrew test because so again, this is what I understand. I've never been to Israel, but I have friends who are Israeli. I also have friends who are Arab Israeli. And so, of course, within the schools in Israel, they teach in Hebrew, but certainly there's Arabic. But most of the university classes are in English, but some programs are just in Hebrew. And so some of the Arab students need to take this. Now, obviously, they're not going to be speaking Hebrew at home, right?
Right.
So they have to show proficiency in Hebrew to be able to do it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So are you learning any Arabic right now? I mean, you're in Georgia, which is not
Well,
Arabic speaking. Are you learning Russian or Georgian?
so I have now been here 3 hours short of 7 full days.
Okay.
And so I am still just getting settled here and figuring out what I'm going to do. I mean, we've spoken about this before. I'm looking to start a business. Now, originally, I had been in Dubai or within the UAE to be certain, but I would live in Dubai. But I also know that Georgia also makes it relatively easy, maybe not as easy, but certainly still fairly inviting. And maybe ideally, I try to set up a business where I make a connection between the two. While I was in Dubai for 2 weeks this time rather than 1 week, I I was paying attention when I went to Lulu's. Now Lulu is like Carrefour,
Okay.
and so over in the produce section, they would list where the different fruits or vegetables were coming from. And for example, I saw India, I saw Pakistan, Iran. What I would normally expect. But I also saw quite a bit of Georgia. And I know, for example, Georgia grows a lot of strawberries, grows a lot of blueberries, and other fruit that are more aligned with what a society that's in the middle class might enjoy.
Okay.
And as the Middle East is becoming wealthier and wealthier, there's going to be a higher demand for fruits like this. And already, Georgia is well set for this. Even recently, a couple of months ago, the separatist sections of Georgia got into another small conflict with Georgia, and the Russians got
How small?
involved.
How many people died in this
Well,
one?
okay, we're talking about just a couple dozen. So it was relatively small. I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
ideal or great, of course,
Yeah.
but it was relatively small. And unfortunately, well, as you know, the Russians have decided to put a lot of soldiers on the border with Ukraine.
Hmm.
I've got no idea why. I haven't been following that at all. I've got no clue why, but it seems like the Russians have forgotten Georgia for the time being. 80% of the blueberry market here in Georgia goes to Russia. And a lot of it also goes to Europe as well.
Yeah.
So the only problem for me is that foreigners cannot buy farmland here. I can buy land that has factories, I can buy commercial land, I can buy houses, but I cannot specifically buy farmland. Now, that's not unusual. There's lots
Yeah,
of
that's
countries
pretty
that
common.
say only
Canada
citizens.
does that
It
too.
is. Earlier, I looked into doing it in Japan, and Japan was definitely a no-go.
Yeah, right.
Because
Good luck.
Japan also had, well, Japan had similar climate in a lot of areas and also good for blueberries. And there is a trend towards more Japanese growing blueberries, but they seem to still rely a lot on imports,
Yeah.
which is surprising because Japan is so wealthy. Same with South Korea. Um, Blueberries here are cheaper than out in the Far East. Well, they also grow a lot here relatively. And there's only 4 million people in the whole country. So you don't need all that many blueberries to have enough for everybody.
Right. Well, so wait a minute. So in Japan or South Korea, could you buy factory land as well? Because in Georgia, you're saying you can. You can buy a factory land. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my
Yeah.
my my crazy idea, my crazy business idea that isn't so crazy because they are actually working on it. Well, build a vertical farm, buy a factory land, and then put a farm on it.
So that's called arcology, what you're talking about. And that is being experimented with. Um, so you, I guess, okay, I'm not a legal expert. I don't know how the Japanese or Korean governments would react to that. What I can tell you is, for example, something that's gone under the radar quite a bit was that at the very northern tip of the Red Sea, between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and of course Israel, there is this economic zone that is developing that is looking to intentionally construct the city of the future.
Right.
And they are looking into doing things like this and designing buildings like this. And that's also one of the reasons why. Okay, so as you know, because of the Abraham Accords last year, Israel and the UAE officially exchanged ambassadors. Oman did. Morocco, I think, did. And there's one or two other Arab countries that did. But the big ones are, and Bahrain. But of course, the fact that they got the UAE and Bahrain. Now, many people suppose or say that the Israelis and the Saudis have been working together for years anyway, that they secretly helped Al Qaeda and this and that.
Yeah, okay, but those secrets this, secrets that. I mean, yes, so what? I mean, how are you ever going to prove that link? Good luck, right? I mean,
even if there was.
we can only go off of basically what you can readily find available in the news media and what government websites publish. I mean, I know that
And now,
sounds pontificating and like I'm basically backing off, but yeah, conspiracy this,
there's no
secret
choice.
that, good luck trying to prove it, right?
And to be certain, both of them, the Saudis and the Israelis, both want to make the Persians look like they are a threat to the security of both of them. Now, I happen to disagree. Okay, I happen to disagree on that point. But to be certain, the Israeli and the Saudis' interests are more aligned. And that's why, for example, if you look at what's been going on again between the Palestinians and more appropriately Hamas and Gaza, and the Israelis most recently, you'll notice the UAE had a really direct rebuke of the Palestinians, of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. And so did Saudi Arabia,
Okay, so
which is a big surprise.
How does this all affect the economic zone that's being built? And what's the economic zone name? What's that called?
I can't remember. I had a lot of Saudi students last year when I was teaching for Cambly, and they would make reference to it, and I'd ask them about it, and I'd learn a little bit more here, a little bit more there. So
sorry, where is it? What's the location?
So it's the very north end of the Red Sea.
Zone of
all right.
Red Sea.
Yeah. And so the reason that this is all playing together is that you're going to need the Israelis and the Saudis to officially recognize one another, really, for the Egyptians and the Saudis to work, because there's a break in the possession of the land and the water.
Right.
So
okay.
for this to function, they have to get along. And that's why, for example, to be honest, I was a little bit surprised when Saudi Arabia didn't come out last year recognizing Israel. I was a little bit surprised. I think that's coming. All right.
Well, who knows?
I really think that's.
So I'm just looking at here. It says the Red Sea Development Company plans to create a special economic zone with its own regulatory framework, entry visas, relatively relaxed social norms, and improved business relations. This is on Reuters.com. And this is backed by the Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia's Red Sea project, basically.
And the Egyptians. It's going to go.
Okay, it doesn't mention the Egyptian, but okay. I mean, it doesn't give me a map either. But yeah, so it's backed by Saudi Arabia, backed by PIF. What is PIF?
I have no idea.
Equity provided by PIF. There should Saudi Arabia's Sovereign Fund, PIF. That's what it is. So it's some sort of foreign fund that's run or at least backed by Saudi Arabia. So it's one of their projects. I mean, okay, so interesting. So it's not up and running then, is it?
No, a lot of these projects, because they have an ungodly amount of money, just like, the UAE, Dubai, making those sand islands out in the middle there and making up sand barges to protect the islands and then build houses or other things to make people go there. They got a lot of money, too much money, but it was when a lot of these plans, now not this one, but other plans, was back when the barrel of oil was $140. We're talking 10 years ago.
Wow, that was 2014 when it crashed. It's middle of 2014.
About then.
Yeah, and then it crashed. Well,
the peak was about 11 or 12.
That took out, basically it was because USA fracking, shale, like fracking companies came in, made everything super cheap. and Canada got pinched in the crosshairs basically. And only recently has it gone well. I mean, Canadian companies are finally doing well again. Canadian market is doing well because oil is finally going up. So Western Canadian
Yeah.
Select is finally trending upwards. But all right, so then we've kind of skipped out over like how where are you? You're in Georgia, but not Georgia, America. You're in Georgia, the country.
Georgia. Yes.
So
Yes.
the last time we talked, you'd almost been shot in the United States. You were very concerned about the fragility of the United States, or at least your life in the United States, and that you basically want to get out to be closer to your son in China. Now, um, so at the Trump got booted out, right? When did you leave the States? It was in November or before the election?
So I got out just before the election. I arrived in Seoul, South Korea on Halloween.
Okay.
And so what happened though, I mean, so when we last spoke, I was still living in Nevada.
Right.
And I was living in Laughlin, a tiny town, casino city. Um, 1 or 2 days later, I went up to Henderson next to Las Vegas where my cousins are living. 3 days later, I was on an airplane from Las Vegas to Seattle. Now, the reason I take the time to mention this is something really, really nasty in a way happened to me and made me really make sure I don't want to come back to America. So what happened was I had already sat down and I was 3 hours early or 4 hours early for my flight to Korea. And I noticed that there were some TSA people over by the door. Now, I'd also noticed that there were some, judging by the accent, there were some Chinese and they were arguing with TSA about whether they could get on the plane or not. And I figured, okay, so this is right. This is a non-issue, right? This is a non-issue. That's the only reason they're there. No, it wasn't. Okay. I mean, I walked around the international terminal some, and I could also see a couple of other gates where there were people waiting and even did board their airplane. For whatever reason, all right, they had these machines up and TSA guards there, and we had to take our masks down and have our picture taken, and they double checked our passport. Now, clearly I could have refused, but I've already gone through security. Why are they doing this again? And I was lied to. I was lied to about what was going on. And then
Okay, so what was going on then?
Well, no. That was not what I was told. What I was told was, oh, this is to make sure you don't have a fever.
Yeah.
That is what I was told. But that's not what was going on. And then when I got onto the bridge, the causeway, to the airplane, they started asking us questions again. Now, remember, in the United States, you don't have to answer any questions. Also,
God love America.
You have, seriously, but you know what I mean by this. All right, you have the right to refuse to answer questions.
Okay,
right?
but
Right to not self-incriminate.
I have to stop you there to ask you, how does someone do that? Because a lot of people who travel to the States might not know this. I mean, and especially here, or in Russia, Ukraine, you get asked by the cops or anything. Especially like in the States, they're kind of threatening already. I mean, the fact that they're not like happy animated policemen like you see on the Chinese posters. They're kind of big guys with tattoos, and they're like, we have the right to take you in if we have, or whatever. I don't know. But what do you say in that situation? Like, I refuse to answer any questions. Well, then what happens?
Well, okay. Well, I will answer your question directly. What I want to say is there's a difference between TSA and a cop. All right. TSA screwing around with me means I might not get on that airplane. So that means I need to buy a new airplane ticket later on to be able to go fly.
Right.
All right. That was the issue. With the cop on the streets. Now, you see, a lot of people, don't forget what social media does. It takes very small examples of things and then makes it seem like that's true for everywhere in that country.
This isn't about social media. This is about you saying that you can refuse to answer
no,
questions
but that's
at the airport.
That's the thing is that, you also added saying that to the police, right? Just talking about what goes on at the airport. All right. So if you're a foreigner in the United States, you still have legal protections within the Constitution, assuming you're going out. Now, if you're coming in, the problem gets to be you're not exactly in America yet until you pass through customs.
Right.
So you don't have it, whereas I do because I am an American citizen.
Right.
That's how this game is played. Yeah, you don't answer their questions, fine. You're going back from whence you came. Now, if you're going out, they can't compel you. And in the end, they have to let you go. All right. They cannot stop you from leaving. There's no exit visa as such.
How long can they hold you? Because you're talking about TSA people. So your example is like if your plane ticket they take off. So, but a foreigner going to like even to Canada, right? If I have a visa, like because I get stamped into the States, and TSA holds me, I miss my flight. That's extra money, and now I'm breaking my visa regulations because I'm overstaying because TSA. What's the culpability there? Like, how do I get out of that one?
Okay. For there again, you're going to need to speak to an immigration lawyer.
Well, so that's going to
What I
cost me
can
money.
say,
The
there are plenty. You're forgetting. There are lots of people who do things pro bono. All right, there are.
Okay, but
And
because I got to stop you here. It's easy to say that. It's like saying, "Oh, just Google it." But the problem is, let's face it. If you're on the causeway, TSA is asking you questions, and all of a sudden they decide to stop you from boarding the airplane. They take you back. You miss your flight. You're now breaking your visa. You don't have your cell phone data plan. You had planned it so it would like expire the minute you get on the airplane. I mean, we're not talking like you made contingency plans for to be arrested or unofficially detained, whatever. I mean, how do you? And this is a thing that a lot of travelers probably have to deal with that people who've never traveled before don't even think about.
even if you do plan, it can still turn out disastrously. I'll get to that and me trying to come to Georgia back on May 1st and how that ended a disaster. But to answer you, so in the United States, you can be detained without charge for up to 48 hours.
Okay.
That's it.
And then
After that, you must be released. You must be.
Or be formally charged with something.
Right. Okay, that's it. Period. That's why you need to make sure that you leave a buffer. Okay, you leave a few days buffer between when your visa expires or whenever you're legally obligated to leave.
Okay.
So if something happens there at the airport, you're okay. All right, it's not ideal, it's not great, but you're ready.
Interesting.
And to talk about the other point, the reason I focused on Georgia, right? Georgia came out of nowhere for me. It was only in March that I was aware of it. What happened was back in October, when I found out about Korea, I started checking what countries were open to Americans. And the reason Georgia caught my eye, I'd been watching some videos about Georgia on Nomad Capitalist and other things. I'd read some articles about Georgia. And so I was familiar with it. And I also knew, generally speaking, Americans could stay there for 1 year without a visa. And like I had mentioned, it's easier to start a business and ... So I saw, oh, wow, Georgia's open again. And they don't need you to have taken the vaccinations. You just need coronavirus shots. Americans can go. And so, okay, right, I need to leave by May 4th. I need to leave Korea. So at the beginning of April, I call the Georgian embassy in Seoul. And I say, okay, I'm an American here in Seoul. I want to go to Georgia. What problems or difficulties might I have? I've done some research. From what I understand, I can go. I want to make sure I can go. So the person who I spoke with wasn't able to answer my question at the time. And they said, oh, but don't worry that we will have the consular call you back. And I'm thinking, well, that's a polite way of telling me.
Don't call here again.
Get this, 3 hours later, the consular actually calls me back. I guess he's got nothing to do. I mean, I guess right, Georgia and South Korea. It's not the closest relationship in the world.
I don't know.
he calls me back.
Oh.
And then when I ask him a question to better understand the situation. He says, I don't know. Let me call you back. And 10 minutes later, he actually called me back. I was impressed.
Wow,
So
good on you, Georgia. You've got a good embassy in South Korea.
So they linked me to a website, and this was the problem. All right, was after they told me no, I can't. I contact the American consulate in San Francisco.
Right.
Excuse me, the Georgian consulate in San Francisco, because that is closest to where my permanent residence is
Right.
in the United States, in California. And they tell me, oh no, you can go, no problem. We'd be happy to see you. And I'm like, huh. And then they give me different Georgian government websites that say I can go.
Right.
And so I'm in this situation of the Georgian government is telling me two different things. So, of course, you contact the airline, right? People go to Facebook, people go to Google, Yahoo. Well, can these people go? Can those people go? Remember, the airline, if they screw up, and I got to Georgia and they don't let me in, the airline has to pay for me to go back from where I came.
Oh,
So the
really?
airline always has an interest. This is true all over the world. All right. So the airline says you can come. They are guaranteeing it because it comes out of their bottom line.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know.
Now, of course, the problem is if the airline is wrong and is overcautious, then maybe
Well,
you're right, but you ain't getting in.
yeah, but you're not going. Well, I wonder if that's true though. How true that is that the airline would know. I guess if they're letting you on the airplane, because like when you normally get deported, it's all on you. I mean, they don't care how you pay; they'll just put a line of credit against you, basically, and you're expected to pay it somehow. I don't know. I mean, but it's coming out of your
So,
pocket at some point, and interest accrues daily, basically.
well, I'll tell you what happened in my situation. So I had read so much information, and there were points that were unclear, and I couldn't get any information. So I was very certain I could go in as an American citizen. And Georgia had printed a list of countries from where you could come from, the UAE being one of them,
Right.
Turkey, America, lots of other countries. But strangely enough, not South Korea, not Japan, not Vietnam, not or Singapore, not countries where there are so few cases. Okay, so few cases. You think, well, obviously they'd be on the list. So what I thought was a possibility, and what turned out to be correct, was that I was coming from Korea to Dubai. Okay, fine. But then I would be going from Dubai to Georgia the same day. I thought there was a possibility that maybe they wanted me to stay in Dubai or in one of those countries on their list for 2 weeks. But I couldn't get an answer from anybody on
Or
this. Okay,
maybe they would just want you to be one of those people from those countries or who does business in those countries. And they're like, yes, you're not just trying to scam your way into the country.
and so that's what wound up happening. When I tried to go to Georgia, and I was in Seoul. All right. Okay. So this is April 30th. Right. And I knew there might be some problems. So I got to the airport really early. Immediately when I thought check-in would be available, I went in to find out. And remind you, it's April 30th, right? I have to leave Korea by May 4th. So I have a buffer. Again, I saw what was coming. Maybe they won't even let me board the plane and just stay in Dubai.
Jeez.
Okay, fine. So what winds up happening is one of the workers for Emirates Airlines, right? I'm flying by Emirates to Dubai, but then I'm flying Fly Dubai. It's another airline from Dubai to Tbilisi. What happens is they contact Fly Dubai to find out if I would be able to get to Tbilisi. And they say, we don't know. And so they had a phone number and they called the Georgian government in Tbilisi and no one was picking up the phone.
Okay.
So while the embassy is good in Seoul, maybe whoever manages things here in Tbilisi
No,
doesn't
not
really care.
he's out for lunch or something. Okay, but so
Right.
you're in
And
the
so what
States,
happens is they
you're in
let
Nevada, you went to South Korea, you had your experience with the TSA officers, you're like, that's it, fuck America. I mean, basically, you're like, that's it, I'm done here. But you were done with the United States before. You sounded like you were an
I
expat
was,
even in your
but
own land, basically. But okay,
this
so then
just
why did you go to South Korea in the first place? What was like? You said that Georgia was sort of like a off the cuff decision, but like what pushed you into South Korea in the first place?
Well, so there were very few countries that were actually open where Americans could go without a visa.
Hmm.
When I was teaching in the United States, I lived right near New York City. And I lived in an area where there was a lot of Koreans. And one of the schools where I worked, there were lots and lots of Koreans. So I'd been accustomed to and fairly familiar. There are differences between the Koreans and the Chinese, to be certain, but they're not as dissimilar sometimes as they'd like to think. And I also had a good friend who lived in Seoul, who had
Okay.
lived in America for a few years. And Orientals typically don't panic.
Right.
And Korea, and I was right. I mean, I'd read about what the Koreans were doing, and I was right. See, I would have gone to Japan actually, but with Japan at that time, foreigners could still go, but only if they had a work visa or a family visa or something like that. As a tourist, they couldn't go. So, as you know, as I've mentioned to you before, I did wind up applying for a job in Japan in November. I
Right.
had the interview in December, but by the end of December, before they could get back to me, the Japanese had decided issuing no more visas, no new visas at all.
Okay.
So that stopped me from even getting to Japan. And obviously, I didn't get that job. And so, like I mentioned, Korea, there wasn't many places. I mean, I could have gone, for example, to most of the Latin American countries were open,
Okay.
to be sure. All right. Most of the Latin American countries were open, and I wasn't opposed to going there either. I had had a lot of especially Colombian students before. And all right now there is a minor revolution going on in Colombia. There is. But there was no way to have seen that in October. It's just I was far more familiar with the Far East,
Yeah.
and also I had seen that the government was putting some restrictions, and it was haphazardly done. Certainly, the Korean government was doing things, but wasn't haphazard.
Right.
And so the Koreans were more predictable, and I just thought, okay, I'd be better there. So that's why I'd gone to Korea originally,
And so
and that's why I went back to Korea.
how long were you in South Korea? Because when we were talking on Skype, you did a visa run to Abu Dhabi, I
Bye.
think, Dubai, but that visa run you said was only like a week or so, and then you were back in South Korea.
Mhm. What
Why did
happened
you? So
was,
yeah, what is the story between a half global visa run?
okay, well, as has been mentioned before, I'm a Jew. And what are Jews known for? Being cheap. Now, that's certainly not true for all, but for this Jew, it is. Now, the reason I went back, see, usually when you're in Korea, you would do a visa run, for example, to Japan or Hong Kong or Singapore.
Yes,
Oh, right. But all of Asia is basically
shut
closed.
down. Yeah.
And so, what does this mean? It means my choices are limited. I certainly don't want to go back to America. In theory, I could have gone to Guam. And Guam would have been a little, well, Guam is a part of America, and it was a little bit cheaper than maybe like Honolulu or Alaska, but it wasn't much cheaper. And again, I didn't want to get stuck back in America if someone goes crazy. I mean, for everything that's going on with the states imposing restrictions in the American territories, it's even worse. And there in the territories, they are more autocratic
Hmm.
than they are in the mainland. That's what I observed just by reading, the newspaper or articles or other things that are going on. I could be wrong. Okay, I could be wrong, but that's just what I observed. And another thing was in Guam, even American citizens had to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, but that was when were you thinking
No,
about
no,
going
no,
to
no.
Guam? That was in January, wasn't it?
Right, right. But see, the thing was in the United States, all right, look, honestly speaking, there are 330 million Americans. You think they keep track of every single one of us suckers? Of course not. All right. So, all right. The government requests, the national government requests that you self quarantine for 2 weeks. Is anyone going to keep track? Oh, good heavens, no. In Guam, there is a very clear delineated system. It's a lot smaller, too, and one international airport. So, anyway, round trip from Seoul to Dubai, $440.
Which is
It
the
was
long
cheaper to do
explanation
it
of
round trip.
right.
It was cheaper to do a round trip to Dubai than a one way to Honolulu.
Wow. And you got another
And so, okay.
passport stamp when everybody, because I mean, let's put it this way: you're like one of the few, you're the only person I know, other than some working travelers here in China, that are taking flights right now. Like no one, even all the travel bloggers are grounded. It's no one's moving anywhere. I'm a little bit surprised. I don't see more, and I haven't looked really because I've been doing some other things. But more of the foreigners who are stuck in places such as like Cambodia or like Thailand, not so much Thailand,
Vietnam.
but like Vietnam, like any place else, like or even like parts of Africa, parts of South America. Like, where's all the, hey, look at this guy, he's been stuck here and he's making the best of it, or look at this girl, she's making the best of it. It doesn't sound like that's happening, but I mean, again, I haven't looked. I don't know. I mean, did everyone just flee homewards? Am I one of these people that was like, I got nowhere else to go. Why would I go back to Canada? I mean, I'll just stay here in China.
It seems like there are a lot of people who went back last January, February, March. And also there are a lot of people who had responsibilities back with family or other things and just decided to go back home. I
Right.
know, for example, a lot of Australians were that way. Now, of course, especially like Australia, you're stuck. You're not allowed to leave except in the case of an emergency. You're
Yeah.
trapped there. And in England, excuse me, in the United Kingdom, unless it's an emergency and you try to leave the country, you can be fined up to £5,000 and you can go to jail for up to 10 years. Now, it doesn't mean that's going to happen, obviously not. But that if the prosecutors want, they can go up to that point.
It's the same in Canada, I
And
think. I'm not entirely sure what the exit scheme is from Canada, but it's bizarre because we take the like airplanes here, or the train. We take the train, it's packed. Everyone's flying, everyone's zipping around. I'm going, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, I don't understand how a country of 1.3 billion people killed the virus, and then like everyone's on airplanes. And it's not like 1 meter spacing on airplanes or trains. It's sardine, old school style, Chinese style, travel style. But all that being said, it's like even my hometown, Winnipeg, lockdown again. I'm going, are you guys still fighting this thing? What's going on? Now, I am sort of the camp that, if you stopped testing for a virus that seems to be very sticky in nature, you might stop finding the virus that's sticky in nature. What's the next big social media hashtag we could follow instead? When are we going to follow that instead? My question,
so
I guess, like my next big question would be, when do you see this ending? I mean, seeing that you've traveled across the world, you've literally left your homeland again, you've traveled across the world, done a visa run across the world. How how is this going to end? How is this going to play out?
So I think if you pay attention, there's something called the World Economic Forum. And about 8 or 9 months ago, they let out a tweet that really got a lot of people disturbed. It said, in the year 2030, you'll have a job, you'll have this, you'll have that. You won't have a house, you won't have any property, and you'll be happy. Okay,
Okay.
look into Davos, look into the Bilderberg Group. It's a lot of very wealthy people from many different countries who are very influential, who have a grand scheme for things. I think what we're running into is who is willing to play ball with them and who is not. So Janet Yellen, who is now the Secretary of the Treasury in the United States, formerly the leader of the Federal Reserve Board, has called for a general global business tax, for the corporate tax of 15%. Well, what would
Right.
this do? What it would do is, among other things, countries that are poor, for example, like in the South Pacific, okay, or countries that are coming up, for example, like Kenya or Tanzania, the way that they try to attract foreign investors is by having the tax rate low, is trying, right? They know to improve a society, you don't spend, you invest, you build. That is what makes a society better. By trying to make everybody have a 15% corporate tax rate at least, what it's doing is it's setting the bar that much higher. Well, geez, it's 15% in Tanzania, it's 20% in France. Well, why not just do France? I prefer living in France anyway. It takes away their competitive edge. It keeps their way and system of being going. Now, the question is, who is willing to play ball? From my experience, what I saw in Dubai, again, these are people from all over the world. Okay, not so many Europeans, but all over Africa, all over, from Saudi Arabia to India, lots of Filipinos, Southeast Asians. Um, they're getting by, they're doing their thing. All right, I see some, and it doesn't matter. Some are very traditionally dressed and not wearing, and are wearing the diaper, excuse me, the mask over the chin, and some
Right.
are actually wearing it over the nose. And originally, the first time I was there at the end of January, mainly it would be men. Certainly, still about 80% would be wearing the mask for men, and
Yeah.
almost all women would be. But the next time I went, I stayed there for 2 weeks at the beginning of May. It was a lot more, and it was all nationalities. Now, to be certain, some demographics about Dubai and the UAE may explain their rather cavalier attitude. The average age is less than 30. Okay, let's be clear. Very little obesity, probably very few comorbidities, unlike Italy, unlike America, unlike France or England. So that may play into it. But judging by what the UAE is doing, they're not going to play ball. All right. The UAE doesn't want to play by this system and will remain out of it. I think Singapore also. Now, Singapore has a much older population, and you'll see that they are much more like Japan or Korea. They want openness, but they also were really trying to protect the older population and trying to find a balance of that. I mean, people forget the average population, the average person in Japan is between 55 and 60.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
mean, they got
China has a bit of a problem with that too, as well. China has an older population too.
And so that's why, maybe I might not think that necessarily what Japan is doing is the best idea for a younger population. It might be more appropriate for an older population. To be certain, the government never said you must close down. The Japanese have always left it as a choice, always to today.
Right.
Here in Georgia, I don't know what the mask regulations are. I know on paper, everybody's supposed to be wearing a mask outside. Now, the first place I stayed for an Airbnb, I was 50 meters from a local police station. And I saw all these guys in police uniforms, and it said Polizia. And I was watching them. And most of them, if they had a mask, it was on their chin. All I know is I don't want to be stopped and told that I was in violation, and this is a threat of me being here. So I wear a mask,
Right.
because it's the law. And look, I know I'm not being a coward. I prefer not to wear the mask. And in the United States, I would usually tell people to, take a hike, but I'm not a citizen. And I
Well,
want to be able
see,
to
and
stand.
maybe this is why you still look like a foreigner there, is that you don't know how to, fight the system. Be like, excuse me, you're telling me to put a mask on. Where's your mask? You got a cigarette dangling out of your mouth there, buddy. I mean, give me one, and then we can talk about this mask situation, right? I mean, then they'll think that you're a local. It's like, oh, this guy. Oh, sorry, sir. Sorry to bother you on your day.
So
Remember, sir, please put your mask on, sir.
yeah, you could be right there. I mean, you could be right. The thing is that I do see a variety of Georgians do wearing it, of all
Yeah.
ages. And then I never knew, this is going to sound a little strange, but I never knew there were so many shades of white. I think you know what I mean by that. Because no, I mean,
What?
here in Georgia, they have a lot of people from the former Soviet Union. All right.
Oh,
And so,
God.
I mean, look, okay, well, the white person of Ireland is very different in skin tone than the white person from Greece.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Okay, right? And there's all of those different shades in between here in Georgia. And that's why there's a lot of Georgians who look just like me. And there's a lot who don't,
right.
right? Brown hair, blue eyes. It's not so uncommon here.
So, okay, so this is a very ground view of what's going on around the world in terms like Georgia mask wearing. I get in the States, it's become a politicized argument. In Canada, it's a big political argument now. It's like you're hurting us all by wearing a mask. What about the vaccinations? Like, are they following that same sort of thing in Georgia?
So I had back in '07 and '08, I had a lot of students from Eastern Europe. And one thing I learned about the Eastern Europeans is they always love a good conspiracy theory. I had a lot of Polish, Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Serbian students,
I
and
think everyone
Belarusian.
loves a good conspiracy theory. It's just whether
Well,
or
it
not
seemed to
it
be
gains any social media traction these days.
Well, it seemed to be fairly endemic among my students. Now, maybe this was the self-selected population around New York City, right? I don't know, but they always were up for a good conspiracy theory. And so, what I will say is that, especially, there doesn't really seem to be political inclination so much about whether you get the vaccination or not. It's not really a left-right issue as much as it is being worried about government authority. And something I've come to realize, especially in Georgia and in other Eastern European countries, not all, but it seems most, is that they are very reluctant to give government power. And maybe that stems from the old Soviet days, people still remember.
Yeah,
So,
could be, could
like
be.
in Dubai, I know, for example, if you check World Health Organization numbers, they tell you 121 people per 100 people have had one of the vaccinations. Well, obviously, what that means is because almost all of them, it's either two or three. A lot of people have gotten both of them. So, whereas in Dubai, okay,
Oh,
Dubai
so
is
they're
number
going by the
two.
numbers of vaccinations, not the number of people who've been fully vaccinated.
Well, that was all the statistics that WHO had. Now, I imagine the UAE government's keeping closer track of it, but
Right.
I haven't seen numbers for Georgia. But judging by what I see here, I I don't think they're exactly all that eager. What I will say is what I see on Facebook is a lot of the foreigners certainly are interested in taking the shots. And something
Everywhere.
also I know is
Wait a
that
minute, wait a minute. Foreigners in Georgia, or like foreigners like people who are not in Georgia at all? Like
foreigners
you're
in Georgia,
okay. Right on.
foreigners in Georgia, um, a lot of them are really keen about getting their shots. And the Georgians who are in these same Facebook groups are saying, um, excuse me, it's slowly coming out. And also, there's a difference. As you know, there's about 6 or 7 different vaccines bouncing around the world. And what I understand is that the Chinese one is the least reliable out of all of them. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's what I understand. And the ones that the Georgians are signed up for is that one. And so that
Wow.
could also be playing into it. I don't know.
Okay,
Okay.
so
There's a lot I don't know.
I would actually say in one of the podcasts I've listened to, the which the no Agenda show, they actually talked about some of these vaccines, and they were actually saying that the Chinese one. I haven't really looked at this to tell you the truth because I haven't signed up for the vaccination program yet. It's available to us. I haven't done it because I'm like I kind of didn't trust it, but my aversion to it is going to disappear the more I want to sort of leave China or travel again, and just to not deal with the hassle of it anymore, basically. But that the Chinese vaccine is actually has part of the virus in it, and like the inactive part of the virus, whereas the Pfizer, Moderna, and the other one, they are like actual like clinical experiments, basically. So that in that case, the Chinese one is actually more effective.
So I can actually speak a little bit to that. My younger brother, who was living in China also, and he lived there longer than I did, at 9 consecutive years. He's back in America now, and recently he got a more than full-time job, working for a private contractor in California who helps to administer the vaccines. And so he's already had his first shot, and he was able to explain to me what is going on with most of the Western vaccines. The way that they are different, all right, so on a virus, the way the virus enters the cell is through the proteins on it. And so what they have been doing is they are targeting the structures, okay, rather than targeting the virus itself per se. They're targeting the chemical structure of the spikes or whatever is coming off the virus. And they're trying to train the immune system to identify that configuration and go attack it. So
Right.
that's how it's revolutionary. That's how it's different. You're completely right.
So yeah, I typed this in, and like there's a whole lots of websites talk about the difference between the coronavirus vaccines. Nothing that I could sort of basically what you just said is what the American versions do, which I guess you
Okay.
could say are the Western versions. But yeah, in terms of the Chinese virus, the Chinese vaccine, I'm not sure what the big difference would be. But yeah, I guess even if it was like the Chinese one has part of the inactivated virus, that would be the big difference. Is that it's like your traditional old virus that you got injected with as a kid. You give a bit of the, what was it, hair of the dog that bit you, basically. So I mean, you give a bit of the virus, your body builds up an immunity, you're good to go. It's organic, it's natural. Your body does it. But these new vaccines that Pfizer and whoever else are coming out with, sounds like they're trying to push the boundaries a little bit of the science, and it's kind of like, I don't know, is that, maybe that's where I'm getting a little bit worried about how it can just not be appropriate to do.
And I'm looking more at it as from the authoritarian point than anything else. I mean, if you're younger than 30, the chance of you, all right, if you contract the virus, the chance of you dying because of it is between 1 in 100,000 and 1 in a million.
Right.
All right, assuming you have no comorbidities. Okay, you're more likely to get hit by a car and die,
Well,
honestly
but
speaking.
even those arguments have all died. They've all disappeared. You don't hear people talk about that anymore. It's like, don't worry about this because, the chance of it happening. But that has left the social
But
conscious.
and that's the problem. See, that's the thing, is that if the government, see, one of the reasons why I was always against government in terms of medicine, okay, of medical care, because it's obvious. If they are the ones who are paying in the end, they are the ones who get to make decisions. All right. They're the ones who say, okay, you need to do X, Y, and Z. All right. You can't take these drugs. You can't eat this food. Oh, but we're doing it to protect you.
Yeah, I
That's
have a
always
cousin
going.
who's posting about this too, and I'm sitting there going, "You're not wrong, but also at the same time, isn't it the government's job to sort of? Because if they didn't do that sort of stuff, where like we do have your best interest at heart, I mean, then what's the government even for?" And I know you're staunchly not for government.
Physical autonomy. Okay, Steve, I would never condescend to you. I would never think I knew what was better for you than you do. I'm not you. I don't know what your needs are, what your wants are, what you want to do in your life and your bodily health. I don't know any of this. And even if I did, I still don't necessarily understand or know your motivations. I'm in no place ever to regulate what you could do or not. And now we're going to give it all to a group of people. See, the thing I'm worried about is if we set this precedent, what's next? How many people every year die because of heart cancer? How many people die because of lung cancer, because of this, because of that? The government will start saying, okay, you trusted us for the coronavirus. Now we're going to try to make sure you can live to 80 or 85. So that means you need to get so many hours of exercise a week. You need to do this, you need to do that. And if you think that this is nuts, Japan, the Japanese national government several years ago tried to enact national exercise for adults. Now, obviously, it's very hard to enforce. I mean, if you remember, for example, 1984, okay, in the book 1984,
The
they had
year
all
or the
those video
book? I mean, the
cameras.
year, that year I don't remember very
You
much. I
weren't
mean,
born.
I was bored, but I'll tell you, my
Oh,
memory is sort of restricted to muscle memory at that point, and language development. But whatever.
okay. Well, in the book 1984, for example, right, you had everyone who had televisions in their home, but there was also video cameras behind it. Oh, by the way, Alex Jones was right on that one. But anyway, the only way they could make sure that people were doing everything they were supposed to be doing was
Oh God.
there was a camera in each house, and that would have been the only way the Japanese could do it.
Right. Okay.
All right, and
So
that's why it didn't
with
come to fruition.
all of this, now I understand the paranoia that you are spouting here. I mean, that's basically what it is.
Paranoia.
It is
It
abject
isn't.
paranoia of what you're
No, it
now.
isn't.
And what it is, what you're talking about though, is a top level approach to doing that. That it's like the government says this, so therefore everybody must do it. Now, the United States, again, going back to the idea that is an experiment in the evolution, in the making, is that they refuse that top down, and that's one of the beauties of being an American citizen and Canadian as well. That you as an individual sort of have that ability to do what you see best under the umbrella of being, again, a cohesive whole as a nation. So this does become an argument of, well, are you doing this for the betterment of the nation, or are you being too selfish in your approach? Now, All that being said, with the top down approach that you're talking about, the United States more bolsters the idea of individual solutions to larger problems, such as, one person, a company creates a vaccine that helps everybody, right? One people helped a lot of people. With Instagram, someone goes on Instagram and teaches people how to eat well. Okay, so that, or like on YouTube, they have their own TV show. Okay, so now all of a sudden we have people eating better, cooking better. We have people working out. It's all about it's a lot of it is the commercialization of different aspects. I understand, and that is very much the American entrepreneurial sort of push to things, and the abject refusal of like the tyranny of government, which is basically what you're saying here. Is like it's going to keep on going and going. It's going to happen. It's going to snowball. One day, the dictatorship will be in the United States instead of other places. But I don't know. It sounds like you're saying this is more of like the rich, the politicians are trying to take over the little guy. But I don't know. How would you do it any better? I mean, what would your solution to a global pandemic be that, given you said that you didn't know what was best for me? That's admirable of you, sir. But if someone handed you a book of statistics and say, okay, 30-year-olds typically do this, 40-year-olds typically do that, people of this birthplace typically do this, people with this type of education typically do that. Keep in mind that although government is big and they do stupid things, they have resources available. And I would laugh if I was told that most depended on Google to research stuff. I would laugh because lots of people probably do. But they have their paws, their dirty little paws or their clean little paws in all sorts of pies. You'd imagine, you would think, and that is what we trust the politicians, the government for, is to
Trust?
you have these resources. That's what the tax dollars go for, in addition to the road building, is to have an understanding of what would make, the base level good for people. But you're saying like that's not what this is. This, like, they're trying an ultimate takeover, which I don't know, gets more into conspiracy theory.
No, they don't need it. They don't need ultimate takeover of power. They just want central planning to make sure they've got theirs. There's a big difference.
Okay.
For example,
well, although I want to hear your example, I kind of wonder if it's going to be more of the same of, like, government sort of big
very
hand coming
clearly,
down.
very clearly, private individuals, for example, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, other people, wealthy people who say, oh, no, you should stop flying. You're wasting too much. You should have fewer children. That's so terrible for the environment. They continue to fly in private jets, which are even less efficient than the commercial airplanes, right?
I'm not sure.
So big.
What's the current private jet that they're flying? I mean, because I understand you mean that there's only 10
because
people
you're talking about
but are they expending the same amount of fuel as a
per
larger
person? Jet? Per person, it's terrible. Per person, it is terrible. They would be better off if they want. They don't want to sit with the pleb. They don't want to stay with the plebs. Okay, they don't want to stay with the plebs. I understand. They could still fly first class.
If it was per gallon, like, instead of getting off this per capita argument and going per gallon of expenditure into the atmosphere, does a private jet expel as much as a commercial jet? I don't know the research.
Okay, I'm not in a place to talk about that. But if you're looking at the amount moved, okay, it's much more efficient to go on those commercial planes. And
let's put it this way,
though.
How many of the people on a commercial flight actually need to go?
Well, does anybody actually need to do anything? I mean, this is getting into a very dangerous argument. I mean, if you want everybody to have a job, okay, if you want everyone to have a job, get rid of computers, get rid of electricity. Oh, we will have
Not gonna
100% employment really
not gonna
fast.
happen. Not gonna happen.
So that is
But
why you never go along the argument of what do people really need to do. That is,
no,
you're not going to like the,
that's the same as
no,
your
it isn't.
comment about just Google it last time, which that set me off.
No,
But
Google is a good place to start and to find resources that link you to other resources. Google is
right.
very good for that.
But
There are
without
search engines that are
Google,
better.
then without Google, that you need
I
computers and
use Google
electricity
as an
to have
example.
Google. Right. So
Well,
I'm
how many people know how to go to a library and look up things?
all right. So
I do, you do, we're
with
old
all
enough.
of that, okay, with all of that, you have left the United States with your American passport and have entered countries that are honoring that passport. That as an American citizen, you are trying to set up a business. So all of that or I shouldn't say it's anti-government. It's bad government. Bad. How dare you? What has you went to Dubai? You were teaching online for a little while, basically, but then you're trying to start a business, which is, I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, and I thought people would be interested in hearing about, is that you are actually, since, and my argument here is like when you told me about the setup of what it takes to set up a business over in Dubai and now Georgia, compared to what it would be like in the United States or even here in China. I mean, so what's the current story? What's the current effort or the progress on that effort?
So, like I mentioned, right, because nobody else knows what was going on, I contacted a company. I looked up several companies and asked for consultation about how they could help me to set up a business in the UAE. And there were two companies that did it for free, and there was a third one who charged me about $150. Well, I paid the $150 also, right? I wanted to get a variety of answers. And there's a lot of truth to be said in the idea of you get what you pay for.
Right.
I'm really grateful I did the $150 one, because what happened is one of the free ones said, "Oh, well, judging by what you've told us, you basically have one choice."
And what was that?
Okay. It was to set up a business in a free trade zone in Dubai.
Okay. So what's the
And
setup here? Like, I mean, because you were trying to, you went to Dubai, you from South Korea on this visa run basically, and that's
right,
where you learned about the idea to set up a business there, or was that something that you were like, hey, wait a minute, why did I do this here instead?
I didn't. Okay, so Korea was just Korea, just to
Right.
wait things out. But what happened in Dubai was I noticed as I was walking around, I kept seeing signs for freelancer visa or establish a business, and they would be posted on phone posts or on walls. And then also, to get back to an earlier question about how much it cost me for all this. So in Dubai, you can rent what is called a partition, which is either the lower half of a bunk bed or the upper half of a bunk bed.
They call it
All right. And
partition. Is that what they say?
it's called a partition.
Well, that
All
sounds
right. That's
a lot
really what
better
it's
than a
called.
bunk bed.
But you're guaranteed a locker and a lock and a key. But then you might be in an apartment, and then maybe there are small bedrooms, and there will be like just one bunk bed. All right. But then in the living room, there might be like 6 bunk beds or 8.
Right.
And so I was staying in a whole apartment that probably had like, I don't know, 18 people. Okay. I was in one of the bedrooms where there was only one other guy, an Egyptian. And so I met some of the other people who were there. One was Egypt, both were Egyptian. One was a lawyer who was trying to get a full-time work visa. The other one was an Egyptian who had gotten one of these freelancer visas. But they all knew people who were doing it. So they told me about it. And so they said, no, this is a legitimate thing. And so that's when I started really researching, is because I'd seen the advertisements everywhere, but I thought it was interesting, but is it real? So, okay, I know. So one company, like I said, free trade zone just in one place. Now, to understand something about the Emirates, there are 7 different Emirates, and they all have different free trade zones, all different regulations about starting businesses. But what is also important is you can set up a business in one Emirate and live in another.
Okay.
So the number of possible schemes, that's what they call it. The number of schemes is more than 50. And within those 50 schemes, there are different types of jobs or businesses you could start up. This is impossible for one person to go through.
Yeah,
And so
it sounds like they're making
it's
it sort of confusing to begin. So then, in essence, what would the overall overview be of the different types of businesses that you could start up? Not just you, but like anyone. I guess it's anything that you could do. But what were you trying to set up?
Well, so to be honest, first I was looking just within the realm because I was looking very carefully, and it was clear I couldn't just work as a freelance teacher. That route I had tried doing, and I explained
Okay.
to all three different consulting agencies. They all said that is definitely a no-go as such.
Why
Then I
not?
went into because that comes under the regulation, the Ministry of Education,
Oh, okay.
because now we're talking about a really different thing and me having to establish a really large business. I mean, if I wanted to come in, say like Wall Street,
Yeah.
okay, and really be something huge, okay, but for something small business or as a freelancer, forget it. Not going to
Not
happen.
gonna happen. Okay.
And so, like I said, another company came back to me and they said, okay, here are basically four options. And then there was one that said, okay, working what you have said, we have three different general things, and then here are the choices that you can make within the first one. Here are a few more choices you can make within the second one, and just the third one is a little bit more direct. But get back to us, and we will supply you with clear definitions of what each of these words mean.
Oh, geez.
Okay.
Okay.
And so I was trying to grasp for anything along the lines of consultation or executive coaching. I mean, within the framework of they don't have proper business English communication skills,
Hmm.
all right, or something like that, something where I'm a trainer or I can use some language so I'm not a teacher as such. And that's how I was trying to play it. And also, for example, there were things like hotel consultancy, restaurant consultancy. There were people who give advice about using drones,
Okay.
about how using space technology, horticulture, jewelry. There were all sorts of different schemes for different ones. And so, I mean, if you're really interested, I know of a company personally that I like and trust. Is it okay for me to say their name here?
Go ahead. Yeah, sure. If you
All
if you
right.
want to be promoting them.
Well, I'm not. The name is Bizmosis.
Okay.
Bizzmosis.
Okay.
Again, this was the one that cost me $150 or $175, but they sit down with you for an hour. They listen what you're saying, they ask you some questions, there's some feedback, but then later on they publish a report and email it to you. I sent it to you,
Yes,
right?
I
I
remember.
showed you what
Yep.
they had done for me. And but then it's working. I've been in contact with them several more times, asking for clarification, asking for this, asking for that. And see, they're honest. See, one other thing that's happened is they never send me promotional emails. Ooh, do this and that, and you get an extra visa to be able to give a worker for your company. Ooh, do this or that, and we will guarantee you workspace.
Well, maybe
If you
it'd be
set up a
good to have
business
a
with us.
visa for your work for an employee, because then you could employ someone else
Well,
to do the teaching, and then you could be in Georgia doing nothing while your employee's doing all the work. That sounds actually
no, no,
like
no,
a
no, no. I'm not saying that in itself isn't a bad idea. What I'm saying is they're using gimmicks.
right.
They're using gimmicks and saying, "Ooh, look, we got to rebate this for this. Ooh, look, we got to rebate for that."
But I mean, they
This
charge
company
you
doesn't.
$175 for it. They've taken
No,
your money already.
but they've given me a thorough investigation, and they
Okay.
continue doing it.
So then, what like
There's a
what's
difference.
the cutoff? Like, when would they stop holding your hand? And I use that term loosely, like because they're walking
Um,
you through the
they don't.
process here.
No, because I know what other services they offer, depending on what you want or need. And I've spoke to them before I paid the $175. They
Yeah.
will help me establish a proper bank account. I mean, it's different between if you're a freelancer or if you have a business permit, or get this, a business permit or business license. They're not the same thing.
No.
Again, it's different for each. It's
Yeah.
different for each scheme. It's different for each place.
All right.
So
So
they track all of that.
now let's be clear about something here, though. This is a consultancy
Mhm,
firm that you're talking about here. That they've taken your
mhm.
money already. They've given you some good information. Which basically, when I hear that you're saying this your time, that $175 is less than how much your time would be worth had you tried to do all that information research on your own, right? So that's what it is. Great. But now, so you have this information, you haven't had a return on this just yet. What's the next step? Like, so if you say, okay, I'm going to do this, where do you go from there?
So I've been trying to fit what I can offer into, right? I'm sort of like a round circle trying to fit into a square peg.
Hmm.
That's a quote from Forrest Gump. Um, my problem is I have to find a way to try to fit into one of those schemes, and it doesn't seem to be working very well.
What's
So the
holding
other
you back?
choice is, well, what's holding me back is I can't make a beautiful bouquet of flowers. I
Okay.
don't know how to make a ring. I can't fit into one of those that's set. And the things that do sort of seem to connect with my past experience isn't strong enough.
Okay. How long would it
And
take you to
so,
become strong enough in one of those fields?
okay, and so that's what I'm trying to figure out
Okay.
is, can I do it? To what extent does it take? And I can do it in Georgia. Okay, with that, I am fairly certain. I could do it in Georgia. Like I said, I can stay here up to a full year. Um, now, if different schemes are different, of course. Okay, and that's another one of the problems. Some of them require that you have a university degree apostolized. You have this, you have
No.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them say, oh no, we don't care about your education. We care that you have a proven business track record
Yeah.
going back years, or this or that. And so the problem is, I can't give you a general answer because there isn't any.
All
All
right.
right, that's the
So,
problem.
and like when you sent me that brochure, I had a look at it. What was one of the things that kind of opened my eyes and was like, "Holy, I can't. Why would you do this sort of thing?" Um, because of the cost involved. So, if you were to actually get set up in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, like there, it was like a $16,000. It wasn't an annual. It wasn't a $16,000 annual fee. It was a one off. But what was the annual fee? I think it was like $3,000 or something.
That wasn't dollars. That was
Riel.
in a that yeah, which is only $3,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay, three to four
So it's like,
thousand dollars. It's a lot cheaper.
but
And the thing is,
every
okay,
year you're paying that.
well, no. So the program that I was specifically looking under, actually, it counted to, okay, altogether, but that includes setting up the business and having a 3-year residency permit, all
Yeah.
right, and being able to operate the business. Okay, to be fair, the operation of the business was 2 years, residency permit for 3 years. It was between $3,000 and $4,000 altogether.
Okay.
Um, now, remember, there is, okay, so your reaction would be, well, why do that? Well, okay, look, in a lot of situations, I would be paying income taxes anyway, which would be comparable or more. First. Second, the restrictions that are going to be put on me trying to operate a business are going to be much less. Again, in the UAE, the way that the punchline is this. The punchline right now with current exchange rates is, if you earn less than $160,000, you're
Yeah.
not paying any business tax at all. And now, if you earn more than 500,000 AED, okay, to be clear, more than 500,000, then, and if your customers are foreign, then you need to start charging a VAT.
Right. Oh, okay. It gets complicated. So it's almost
But
you have to
otherwise,
have
it's
good notes
nothing.
going on.
Well, no. See, that's the thing is, look, as long as you don't attract any real attention, right? Because you open up a bank account and you just keep records. And if they ask you, okay, there's just one page to file a year. Okay, that's it. And so you don't need to worry, oh, do I qualify for this reduction? Do I qualify for that reduction? You
Oh,
don't need
okay.
to worry
So
about any of it.
you
I
don't
would
have
never
to.
be getting $150,000 a year.
So it sounds
I
like
don't need to
you're not
worry.
expecting your consultancy firm to do very well. Then that's not very
No,
promising either.
no, my goal. But remember, all I'm doing, remember, my motivation is just to remain free, not get stuck anywhere until Fiji reopens.
Right. Okay.
That is
So
that's my overarching goal.
which was sort of like where I was kind of wondering, like, I have having to remind us all, you are because you are traveling on an American passport, but you are looking to basically become you are a global nomad as it is. I mean, let's face it, you have no place of domicile. And I was actually I was wondering for a guy like you, and this also applies for a person like me who I've been in China for 6 years now, and you've been in China for a long time as well. Like where does home become? But before we get to that question, I was actually I wanted to know more about the You said that there was restrictions, there was less restrictions, and this was my argument when I messaged you about this, about setting up a business across the world rather than being in the United States, where you could apply for deductions. You don't get taxed until you actually make money, which is the same thing in Canada. You can carry forward losses for years, right? And you can spread around your like, and that's what big companies do is that they take pools of money from here and they allocate it here, and then take deductions from here. They get credits. So that's the income tax scheme, scam, whatever you want to call it in North America. But with why would you push yourself? Imagine if someone else was telling you this, what you were trying to do, or someone was thinking about doing it. Why would you encourage them to do that, to go your route, rather than move to the United States and set up a business?
Well, to be honest, I don't care. Okay, if people are interested in doing what I'm doing, that's fine. But honestly, I don't care. I mean, for example, people
But
think that,
if someone was asking, like, okay, I mean, I like the idea, but why would I do that instead of going to the States? Like, you're talking to someone like who wants to immigrate somewhere,
but but
right?
but again, you have to remember why I'm doing it, and this is why I think governments are best, which are essentially non-existent.
Right.
Each person has their own agenda, and my agenda is trying to cause as least amount of harm as possible.
Okay.
And I believe the most effective form of coercion is government. And I don't want to, it is the most effective form of coercion in the world is government. And the biggest problem with government is that people grant them the authority, all right, the moral authority to use violence on other people.
Bit of a
You don't have that
stretch.
over me. I don't have that. No, governments make war all the time. Governments put people in jail all the time. Governments force people to take drugs. Governments force people to have abortions or to be neutered. Has your neighbor ever done that to you, Steve?
So,
Yes or
to
no? Has your neighbor ever done that to you?
none of my neighbors have ever done that to me here in China, nor in Canada. None of my neighbors ever have ever forced me to have an abortion, nor have they. Although I think they've recognized the thing, the real obviousness. Although this could be questioned now too, that I can't have abortions anyway. I mean,
Oh,
but
well.
getting back to the other, if someone, I don't know, if someone was looking to immigrate to the United States with the idea of setting up a business, you met them in one of these partitions or a hostel, would you recommend you? It doesn't sound like you'd recommend them to go to the United States
So,
anymore, right?
well, okay. So, I mean, I'm not oblivious. My father ran his own business in America, Proper LLC. One of
Okay.
my brothers does. Another brother has a farm. Another cousin had his own plumbing business. I mean, I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and so I understand why. For example, a lot of the government agencies are fairly efficient in the United States. All right, the Department of Motor Vehicles, notwithstanding, usually in most places, now New York City being an obvious exception, San Francisco, Chicago, the big cities, but the more likely you are in a less urban area, the easier and the faster it is to get the proper permits and licenses, and the less likely the government is to jerk around with you.
Okay.
It depends on the state. I mean, it really depends on the state and the jurisdiction. And
Where would you
then you
suggest
also,
someone goes to?
okay, so different states have different tax regimes, and it'd be better to speak with a tax consultant among others. What I can say is, well, it depends on your type of business. There are some states that don't have sales tax. There's some states that don't have property tax. There's some that have neither. There are some states, famously Delaware, that makes it very easy to set up a corporation.
All right, and yeah, a lot of the tech companies are actually based out of Delaware. I mean, this is news to me. But okay, so the two states that keep on popping up in my feed and in the places that I hear people talking about are Florida and Texas. Like, is that they now, along with people like you who've fled the country, there's a mass exodus from California and New York City or New York State down to places like Florida and to Texas where they don't have the same restrictions. They don't have the same societal expectations to follow whatever. But yeah, so it sounds like those two states pop up more and more. And I know a lot of Canadians, a lot of Canadian farmers go down to Florida for the winter. They're called snowbirds. And they go there just because it's easier to get set up. You could buy property before. I'm not sure what it's like anymore. But yeah, it's they're affordable. They're free in the sense like you can. There's not as many restrictions. I mean, would you ever recommend those states, or is there somewhere else that someone should go?
So again, I don't beat around the bush. It depends on first how willing you are to live in communities where English might not always be the first language. All right, it's just the reality. In a lot of places in Florida and in Texas, Spanish is the predominant language.
Okay.
If you're comfortable, I have no problems. Okay, I lived in communities like that. I have no problems. Some people maybe not so much. The things to remember about like Texas and Florida. Well, if you don't like old people, Florida's terrible. Okay. If you don't like old people, also if you don't like Cubans or you don't like Jews, stay out of Florida. Florida is hot and humid most of the year. The Cubans are really good. They're really business savvy.
Right.
All right. They're really business savvy. In Texas, you have a lot of people from China. You also have a lot of entrepreneurial Vietnamese. Obviously, the Hispanic population is actually fairly innovative as well. Something people keep on forgetting is the Hispanic population is not necessarily Democratic or leftist, as especially this last election has shown. Senor Bush, for all the Spanish he spoke, trying to get votes back in 2000 and 2004, it was Trump who got the most Hispanic votes ever for a Republican. And the thing is that they are more culturally conservative. And economically, as they have been staying in America longer and longer, they are also becoming economically more conservative. So that's why a lot of people keep talking, oh, Texas is going to flip blue. While it may not be as hard red as people like, I don't see it ever going blue because of that.
At least not in the foreseeable future, right?
No, and so what you have going on right now is the governors of Texas and Florida and other Republican states have been less micromanaging the coronavirus as opposed to New York, Michigan, California. So businesses have been able to remain open, have longer hours, less regulation about percent capacity. And so that's why they're doing better economically.
Yeah, that's sort of
People
what I've
see
heard too,
this
is
and
that
realize it.
those states have been a little bit more, they haven't been necessarily loose, but they haven't been as strict. And as a result, like the business, like the whole perception of business is a lot better over there. Although, because those bailout programs have been federally issued, so some of those places they're having trouble finding people to work because no one wants to work. They're getting free money from the government. Which honestly, I mean, if I was an immigrant, but not Canadian, even Canadian, and I had the choice between working for money and not working for money, I don't know. I think I'd like to think that I could be productive making money and not working and going to do something else. I don't know. Sounds like a pretty good deal in the States.
Something I was always confused about is this argument for universal basic income. And Yang, I can't remember his first name, Andrew, I think, Yang ran for president last year and was big about UBI. So back in 2009, I was living in Oman, and it was the first time I heard of such a system. What happens in Oman, now you need to remember, they aren't a rich Gulf country. They got oil, but not a lot. But they have a similar system where if you are Omani, you're guaranteed basically about $400 or $500 a month. Okay, that was the punchline. So not a lot, but it's more than enough if you're smart to get by. You're not living a great lifestyle. But what do? You join, because a lot of the families there have 7, 8, 9 children. Guess what? You got 2 or 3 brothers. So you know what you do? You go to Muscat, you share a space with your brother or a couple of your friends, and you have plenty of pocket money.
Which, I mean, people can do that in the States anyway. So, okay, but I
But
mean, I don't think
and
people
so
are people immigrating to the States for the business opportunities or for the free money? Like, it sounds like the argument's more for free money rather than for business opportunities.
Okay, so you have to remember, so certainly, as you've made sort of reference to before, the United States is certainly a federal system. And while some of those benefits that you reference are coming at from the national level, some of them are coming from the state level or maybe even the city or county level. All right, so you have all of these overlapping ways of getting money. Um, why people are coming to the United States? So, all right, predominantly, all right.
No, not why people are going. If you met someone who said, I go do what you're doing in Dubai or Georgia,
Mhm.
or should I go to the States to set up a business and get the passport? Because they're like, I don't want to go back to my home country either. Pick a country that they don't want to go back to. I'm waiting for, X number of years until such and such country opens up, or I just want another passport, such as like even getting one from St. Kitts and Nevis. I mean, would you say, yeah, States is a great place to go because you have all this going for you? Or would you say, you know what, you'd be better off going somewhere else?
Well, okay, obviously it depends on what the person's professional background is, what their entrepreneurial spirit or skills are. Um, like I said, within the banking system as it currently stands with the SWIFT system, all right, and the dollar as the reserve currency, there are certainly benefits to being based in America. Okay, that's certainly correct. I don't disparage that. But you also happen to know that I got a lot of gold and silver, and I'm betting on that system eventually failing. But so that's why, and even if it doesn't fail, it's going to get a lot worse. And it has been. All right.
I've
It's
been telling
slowly
people,
working its way through.
like my dad was all invested like in the stock market and traded everything. I mean, it's not like the stock market's one thing. Companies could disappear, but gold and silver, I mean, you're not going to go wrong having that. It's not even like soybeans or any other corn or pigs. I mean, it's going to stay there, even if it dips in value again. It's been there, right? So it's one of those. The I always tell people, yeah, buy some gold and silver and just put it away. Pretend you don't even have it anymore. But I mean, obviously keep it safe. But okay, so it sounds like the States is the question. Now you've said a lot that the it depends, it depends, it depends. The question that sort of raises in my mind now is that if it depends so much, then why are you in the Middle East when I don't think it's that I'm far off saying that if you were to say that you want to freelance as an English teacher or as a teacher, China is the biggest market. Like Asia is where you'd be, and Asia being primarily China or going to Vietnam. Why aren't you in those countries freelancing rather than Georgia waiting for Fiji to reopen?
Well, okay, certainly I've lived in a lot of different places. The best time I had was when I was living in Vietnam, okay, to be certain. And I was even able to occasionally find private students who could pay up of $40 an hour in Vietnam. That's an ungodly amount in Vietnam.
That's a lot of
Okay, it may
money.
not sound like a lot. It is. That is incredible money. Vietnam is basically not letting anybody in.
Okay, so
I would
that one's
consider,
off the.
I
You
would,
can't.
and then also even most countries don't have a freelance visa. I mean, a lot of this, okay? I mean, for example, the Baltic countries, and then also some of the former Yugoslavia countries offered something like this before the coronavirus. During the coronavirus and afterwards, a lot more countries became interested in digital nomads, in freelancers who are working over the internet, in things like this. It was only after this has started. China, I think, okay, again, well, you know what I think about China. I don't necessarily know that it's best to speak about it on this platform.
What would you say
Well,
against
first,
them? But
Zoom.
I mean,
Well, no, there's a
why?
lot I could say, but Zoom is owned and video. It's known that Zoom conversations are recorded and monitored by the Chinese government. That is known. That's no conspiracy theory. The
I
Chinese
sure
government
hope
is even
this one
admitted it.
records because I did one interview and I lost the recording, and guess what? They couldn't get it back, so I lost 3 hours of conversation. Now, I hope this one's being recorded, and that one had nothing to do about China or anything. That was a completely separate topic. But
But
with
also, there's
all
no
of that,
such thing in
so
China.
then where? Okay, so China. This actually kind of brings up a point of like who's coming into China right now because if so many international flights have been shut down, they talk about some imported cases. I'm going, who's traveling? Who's coming to China? How are they able to get in? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's the fact that you're in Georgia, although you still haven't proved it. I asked for proof that you're in Georgia. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like you got
I
better
showed
lighting.
you weren't paying attention earlier.
Oh,
Okay,
passport stamps. You could have printed those off the internet. Nah, no way. No, that means
okay,
nothing.
look at that. May
Photoshop.
15th,
Photoshop.
2021. And then, okay, all right, same book, okay, same book. There's my picture.
Oh, and that's your number. There we go. We'll publish that online. Thanks.
I could
The
see, I had the camera on. I know you couldn't
so
see the numbers.
right. So with the, man, it sounds like China's blocked off for international travel. I don't understand who's traveling in and out anyway. But the fact that you're able to move around, what's the situation in terms of like flights and buses, like other forms of travel? I mean, is it full or is it kind of like not at all, like 1 meter spacing sort of
Okay.
thing?
So this will be a combination of what I've observed where I've been staying and also the news reports that I see. For example, domestic air travel in the United States right now is supposedly 60 to 70% of what it was in December of 2019.
Okay,
So
so
it's
my
come back a long
only
way.
question would be in terms of the numbers. When you flew from Nevada to Seattle, was the flight full or was it not? I mean,
Okay, so
how many
remember
people were
this was
there? Yeah,
okay. So
yep,
remember
yep.
this
In
was at the end
October,
of October last year. It was, I don't know, 20, 30% full. Oh
okay.
yeah, to be no doubt.
Did
It
you
was
look
the
at
airport was fairly empty.
I don't know. Okay, so the airport was basically empty. All right. Here in China, the airport's packed, subways packed, buses packed, everything's packed again. Airplanes are packed. So it's like this thing never happened. The only thing is that people are wearing masks. Oh wait, they did anyway because of the pollution. I mean, so like in terms of things getting back to order, like honestly, I seem to be living in a bubble here because China has it's back to business as usual. There was no pandemic other than the fact that there's more signs out saying please wash your hands, wear a mask, keep don't spit everywhere, please. Okay, things like that. You see that a lot more. You see people wearing masks, but again, they were wearing them like when I first arrived in 2000, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Pollution was at an all-time high. People were wearing masks all the time anyway. So it's back to business as normal here, as usual. So I mean, in terms of your transportations, it sounds like the flights aren't completely occupied. Have you looked into any other forms of transportation, like trains or buses or I don't know, camel?
Okay. So so unfortunately, no camel riding for me in Dubai or here in Georgia, though I have ridden camel before. It's not bad. What I noticed when I was in Korea, so I rode the buses and the subway quite a bit the first
Hmm.
time I was there. The subway, it was essentially full. Okay, there was no social spacing or anything like that. On the buses, there was some. I'm not sure if it was because of the routes I was taking.
Okay.
Maybe other routes, it was busier. I just happened to be on buses where there was less. Um, Now it was strange because people would be standing right next to each other or, right on top of one another in the subway, but there was still social spacing at supermarkets or other things like that,
Really? Yeah.
or in
Okay.
restaurants. But in Dubai, it's the opposite. Okay, in Dubai, there's essentially no social spacing in the restaurants or other places, but they have seats blocked off on all of the public transportation,
Okay. And so
so
they
you
can't
can't
you can't
occupy them.
you have to sit one like every second seat sort of thing.
And
Okay.
people aren't hanging over one another. Now they're certainly talking to one another, and a lot of them aren't wearing the mask at all or properly. So there's spit and whatever you might be worried about. Oh yeah, you're
Yeah.
going to breathe it in.
So then,
Here in Mhm.
yeah, go. So in Georgia, what's it like? I mean, in terms of transportation, have you driven around very much or gone very many places?
So all I can say is, again, I've only ridden the bus once. When I first got here, I took the bus from the airport to basically where my Airbnb was. One thing I want to say is things are really cheap, and I haven't figured out the system of pricing here because a taxi to take me from the airport to where I was staying was 40 lari, which is about $12 or $13, which wasn't unreasonable.
Okay.
But again, me being the cheap Jew, there's a cheaper way. For half a lari, I could take the bus. Half. So 80 times less. And it only took me 40 minutes.
Well, that's
So I took the
typically the
bus.
case, though. It's like, yeah, usually a taxi is going to
And
cost you
80
like a
times,
fixed
but
amount. Yeah.
but an 80 times difference in price, 80 times.
That's
Well, anyway,
how was the
um,
the bus? Was it comfortable? I mean,
it was
what's
fine. It was
transportation like
comfortable.
in Georgia?
So, like I had already known this, Georgia is very similar to what the type of service you might expect in the Czech Republic or in the Baltic countries. I mean, it's really close to Western Europe. It really is.
Yeah,
There was air conditioning. They were a place where you could plug in your USB to charge your phone. I never
that's
even seen that before in
yeah.
Korea or Dubai.
They have that now in the Tim Hortons near my place or the Tim's Cafe. They have USB sockets now right beside the traditional sockets. Yeah, that's the new method of charging your phone, I guess, which is great. It's more universal than the other method of doing it.
There were electric signs for the location and other things like that on buses. Like I said, air conditioning. It was clean. I mean, and even sitting in the back, I wasn't next to a hot engine or anything like that. Actually, it was reasonably quiet.
Yeah. So it sounds like Georgia's a nice place to be. Is it good temperature there now? Good weather?
So, Tip, can I speak to you in American, or do you demand, the rest of the world? Can I talk to you in Fahrenheit, or do you need
Yeah.
it in Celsius?
Whatever's easiest for you.
Well, all right. So the highs are supposed to be around 90 to 95, which
Okay.
is about almost 35, right? 35 as a high in Georgia year. All right. So like in July. Apparently this year's a little unusual. It's a bit warmer. Certainly not as warm as Dubai, but it's around 85, 86, so about 30, 31 degrees. But it's supposed to get cooler. It's rained a couple of the days I was here, so it's pleasant. At the bottom, it gets to a little bit below freezing. And that's why, for
Oh, okay.
example, you can grow blueberries here.
Yeah, because that's actually good for them. It makes them sweeter, apparently, as I learned in Australia. The so You've only been there for a week, which is, I mean, that's nothing. And you basically are set up. I mean, other than the fact that you just changed dwellings today or yesterday. I mean, you don't have to leave for another year, basically, right?
And that gives me a lot of time to see, right, to explore my three options.
Okay.
And maybe things will have changed and I'll
And
just go to Fiji,
you're still thinking of going back to Dubai to set up a business, or can you do this all online now? Like, is that what sort of you're thinking?
So that was another thing about the consultancy group I'm working with. Everything can be done with me remotely. I have a choice.
Right.
I could be there and do it,
But
but I don't need to be.
I'd be more interested in, like, so are you going to stay in Georgia even if you have a business in Dubai?
Okay, so the thing then becomes residency permit. One of the
Right.
key things that's been going on because of the coronavirus is, and you even see this, for example, like with Australia. Australia's refusing its own citizens coming in. Both the American and Canadian government say you must take a PCR test before you come in. And with Canada, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks, right? So I can't just immediately go back to America. All right, I can't. I must have a test that says I don't have the coronavirus, or I will be refused to be able to get on the airplane to go back to America. So the thing is, you want to be able to go out and stay out if you see the restrictions coming. And having a residency permit is another way to ensure that. Of course, a foreign passport would be better, but I'll take what I can get.
So are
I'm
you going to
not
get
wealthy.
residency in Georgia or not?
Well, so that would be the thing, is that if I do get a freelance permit or a business permit or a business license, that comes with the permit. Okay, I get both together. Similarly, if I do that in Georgia.
In Dubai. Okay, so in both, if you got some sort of business permit, then you'd get a residency permit as well.
In either of them,
In
correct.
either. Okay, so is it very difficult to do? Which one would be easier? Have you figured that one out yet, or is that still under
So
investigation?
that is under investigation because something I've very quickly come to realize. Well, first, with the one in the UAE, like the scheme that I was specifically looking at, my business would be set up in Abu Dhabi. I would be set up in Dubai. Because of this scheme, I would have to have clients in the UAE. Now, it would be fine for me to
Okay.
have like 80 or 90%. 90% of my clients are foreign. That's fine. But I must serve the UAE a
Yeah.
couple of times a year at least. Okay,
Okay. That,
fine.
that, that makes sense.
Fine.
Does Georgia have the same
Um,
requirement?
so see, that's the thing, is I don't know how it is set up in Georgia yet. I haven't had the opportunity to speak to a consultant. Also, because I have so much time, I'm not really considering going within education. Again, I think if I'm going to be able to establish a business that works with both, well, maybe it'll be in education. But I'm thinking, again, like I made reference to, maybe I can't own the farm that's growing the blueberries.
Right.
But
Okay.
maybe I can find something, that's a value of trade between both, an import-export company or something like this. There's also a lot of entrepreneurs here in Georgia, a lot of foreigners from India, Persia,
Ha-
looking to do something.
so have you thought about like doing the non-own business route and just getting a job with someone else doing an import export, or is that not in the cards?
So, like I mentioned to you earlier, foreigners can actually come to Georgia without a visa and look for a job. They can even start working the job and apply for the work visa. Now, I'm not sure what restrictions there are in terms of what worker companies. I haven't been here very long, so I
Right.
haven't had any opportunity to really explore that. I wouldn't, if I could get a residency permit, then I would certainly consider it because I don't need that much to live. I
Yeah.
really don't. And again, I'm just playing the long game, waiting for Fiji to be back opened up again.
Yeah, you sort of live on the frugal end of frugality, as you have made clear. uh,
But see, the thing is, I enjoy it.
yeah, and
I'm not, I'm
this is
not
one thing that
penalizing or hurting myself.
right people do have to be aware that, I mean, the style of life that you're living is by choice, but also, I mean, it's not for everybody. It's not like everybody can do this. Although it's not bad to try it. I mean, to go international and travel and then try to set up a business and just see what sort of restrictions there are. I suspect if more people did that, even from Canada, the whole social media atmosphere would change because there would be a whole new appreciation for this the system that is in place, and that could probably help the system a little bit better as it stands right now. But all that being said, so what's your feeling so far? You were in Dubai for how long? A couple of weeks? You just got to Georgia, so how long were you in Dubai for?
Okay, so the second time I was in Dubai was for 2 weeks. That's correct.
2 weeks. Okay, so then what's your feeling been so far? Feeling been so far, like South Korea, Dubai, Georgia. Which one feels like it's like the place that would probably be the best fit?
For what I want.
I guess so. Yeah.
Um, so I was really interested and impressed by the different peoples living together and working, going about their business in Dubai. And just seeing all there are mosques, but there are temples. There's actually even a synagogue in Dubai. And so being able to see all this, I mean, this is what like New York City was like before. All right, New
Right.
York City, as much as I may dislike the American government, as much as I really dislike de Blasio, I am heartbroken by what has happened. All right, I was born in Brooklyn. All right,
Right.
my mom's side is from Brooklyn. Now, I didn't grow up there very long. I worked and I lived in Manhattan, but I am just so irate with how that bastard de Blasio and Cuomo, the governor, just destroyed the city. And so being there where I can experience, I can see how people live, I can try different foods, see different things. Dubai is great. And again, there is this energy, there's this
Yeah.
life that I don't find in Korea. Honestly, it's not in Korea, it's not in China. Vietnam has it. Again, maybe because it's a younger population, definitely not in Japan.
Okay.
Out here
Okay.
in Georgia, also, you can feel the vibrancy and life, which is also something that died in a lot of places in America. There are certainly some places where you can feel this energy, like people have hope or expectations that they can do something. And
Wow.
that's why Georgia's great, but also Dubai.
You just laid it on the line. Boom. There, those words are something to go by there. Okay, and I would agree. Like even in Canada, I look at the Facebook posts and stuff like in Canada, I just go, it doesn't sound like it's a place to go anymore. It just lost its luster. It really did. I find it interesting. Not surprised that you don't see it in China, although China has it that's in mainland China. If you meet an expat Chinese, they are a very hardworking group of people. But that goes
Yes.
into like they belong into the expat part of the equation rather than cultural China, cultural America, cultural entrepreneur. It's there's
You're right.
the person who becomes an expat and then goes to set up a business as an expat, very different breed of people. I mean, and that's the world over, which is who you met in New York City, and that was the like. I mean, I was talking to a friend, Russian lady who now lives in New York, and she's like, yeah, it used to be this great city. It's kind of died right now, but she was optimistic. She's like, it's going to come back. It always has. It's been the place. It's been, a place that people have always come to. So, and I know people have gotten into arguments about whether or not New York City is actually dead. I don't think it's dead. I think it's just it's a lull. But then again, I've only been to New York once for a week. I loved it when I was there, and I was amazed that I got scammed twice out of my own stupidity. But I mean, out of all of that, there was there was still an enormous pulse. I usually call it a pulse whenever what you're talking about, that energy that's going through the people. I am surprised that you say it's not in South Korea. What happened in South Korea 10 years ago? I mean, I was there. It had a pulse. Busan had a pulse. I'm not sure if you went down that far, but yeah, it sounds like South Korea even has changed a little bit, a lot in the last decade.
So, right, like I said earlier, Orientals typically don't panic. And the Koreans and the Japanese don't panic, but they are also typically more conservative.
Right.
I mean, that's something that really stuck out with me during my time in Korea. Almost everybody was wearing black suits, black pants, white shirt and tie, or something similar for the men. Occasionally gray or tan, or maybe a gray overcoat. And the women similarly dressed, maybe a little bit more color, but not much. And even the university students, as you know, I lived in near a university community. Now, some of the foreigners, certainly, they were lots of different colors. But the Koreans themselves, not so much. And what has come is the West has been so successful. We are resting on our laurels. And similarly, Japan and South Korea, the older generations, they had to be entrepreneurial. Okay, but now there's a social system, there's basic guarantees, and we have become softer. We prefer staying within our norms. And this is true of all societies. Japan has been successful for long enough to develop a population like this. That in their economy's basically been trapped since the early 1990s. With South Korea, it's been less, and to be certain, the Koreans are on the forefront of things like AI innovation and robots, but they also have to be because their replacement birth rate is less than one.
Well,
They,
there's an
they
idea.
have no choice.
There was actually a kind of looking at some of the bridges here, and some of them are cracked, or at least they must be doing some work on them because it was too uniform for it to be like degradation. And I know I've realized two things about China. One, okay, it does have an aging population. Number two, the kids growing up are highly educated, and a lot of them are bilingual. And especially if they become highly educated or bilingual, like shit, they're gonna want to go fix bridges in the future, right? For $10 an hour or whatever the rate is. So, and this kind of gets me. Well, I was wondering why you haven't set up a business, or if you haven't been looking at this, is getting into the AI, the robotics sphere thing. Like instead of doing something like an ESL, a soft skill that just about anyone could do, basically, let's face it. But getting into the hard skills of, like, if you want to do import export, get into AI, get into robotics, get into those services where you have a robot crawling around a bridge, or hey, window cleaner. Just a simple window cleaner would be fine. We had a thunderstorm last night. Windows are dirty. Not that it bothers me, but there's an opportunity there, right? And South Korea is going to need it. China's going to need these robots. Why aren't you or someone, or the people that you're in that group of circle that you're meeting in those partitions, is anyone talking about that stuff?
So, so what I will say is I had considered something like that. Actually, what I thought about, and this was the first time I was here. There was a guy from India, Shyam, and I'm still in contact with them. We had considered setting up a school that would teach things like AI and robotics, but in English. Okay. All right. See, something I've learned, like, who got rich from the American gold rush? All right. The California gold rush in 1848, 1849.
It's an old argument. It's an old argument.
The people who were supplying the miners were the people who got the richest. So you let those people worry about taking risk. Give them the supplies they need to take the risk. So training people to do something. See, a lot of people are going to need it in English because that's what a lot of the classes are in. That's what the training manuals are in this and that. And so setting up a school that would actually cover something like this. In terms of the practicality, the problem gets to be, for example, I did look a little bit into this. 3D printers and the cost of the ink. See, this is where it gets to be the problem. Is someplace like Georgia, as an example, the cost of just using that type of equipment to do it costs so much more than hiring a person to do it. And the headaches
Right.
that come with the person doing it. It wouldn't work in Georgia. Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't work in other economies.
No.
Okay, of course not. With the UAE, it's a mixed bag because the problem is you could find a place to stay if you're willing for under $100 a month. Again, you only have a bed, but you have good Wi-Fi. You could do a business online. But you could also find places that are $10,000 a month in rent too, right? The UAE has that level of services, so you could offer it, and it would be
Right.
feasible, I think.
So I mean, that's sort of a surface view of what's going on with the AI or robotics. I mean, have you ever thought about getting into the sourcing of robotic parts and sourcing of programming? Like, because I mean, a lot of the programmers are based in Ukraine and Russia, but these cheaper countries that you could hire someone to program it. Now, I can tell you as a website owner myself, looking into getting to someone to develop a website, the internet research I conducted basically said that if you hire someone cheap, you're then going to have to hire someone expensive to fix it. Because the cheap people do exactly what you expect them to do, and they're not going to do very much more. So it comes with sort of a price of being able to do it. But have you looked into sourcing any of that stuff? Is this part of the equation, or is it like you're intent on becoming a consultant?
I had I never considered it before. All right, to be honest. Now I had noticed that certainly there's ability that is something usable in that there is a lot of available labor, like here in Georgia or there in the UAE, where don't get me wrong, you pay them a decent salary,
Yeah.
but it's a lot better than what the local salary is. All right, and it's certainly doable. I am not familiar enough with those areas. And the other thing is, remember, my end game is getting to Fiji.
Right.
And so if I wasn't worried about, okay, to be honest with you, if I wasn't worried about wanting to get to the UAE, or excuse me, to Fiji, then I'm working on a timeline of 5 or 10 years, then yeah, I can take a year to
Yeah.
learn something in depth and be comfortable enough to do it. And I would do it. But I hope to
Yeah,
be in Fiji in like three
that's a
years.
big
So
gamble, right? And yeah, I understand that, and I hear this a lot, and I used to say this too, in my 20s. Oh well, I want to be here, I want to be there, so I'm not willing to put in the commitment now. I can tell you now, getting the age that I'm getting to be, the age that I am, I go, had I started sooner, had I just did it, had I just done it, and not even, thought about it again, and instead, from then until now, I would have such a treasure trove of just little accomplishments, even if it was small. It doesn't matter. The fact that you're able to do it and say it, learn it, spend the time. I mean, again, what else are you going to do with your time unless you have other commitments? And even then, I don't know. Seems like people could, are able to find the time to do lots of other things that won't progress them in the next year. I mean, for the last year, I mean, I've been trying to study Python. That's my next big program. Actually, in July, I'm going to be starting. Hopefully, I don't know yet. I'm going to be starting 100 days of Python under one of the courses. So, I mean, it's worth it to try. And because even in a year, it, I have to ask you, if in a year you're still in Georgia and you haven't started any of this stuff, I mean, then what? I mean, I know you don't know the answer, obviously. You're planning to be in
but
Fiji in 3 years. But what if you're not in Fiji for the next 10 years? What is your game plan for for the next decade? Is there one?
okay, so I'm almost 38. And when I started all of this at the just turning 21, again, like I told you, it was a novel idea. People pay me to go to their country. Sounds
Yeah,
great.
it was a
I
great idea.
never, I never had a focus, and I didn't need one. It was only later that I became so, for example, politically radicalized, and that it got me so motivated to stay out of the United States. And the most important thing to me is that I can respect who I see in the mirror.
Right.
I don't really care about other people's opinions. I follow what I believe is ethically or morally right. And that's really what guides me. Oh, something might be more convenient. Oh, I might be able to make money doing this. But if I think something's wrong, I I say no and I leave. So that's what's motivating me. Now, to answer your question, if I don't have a business set up by then, that could be fine. What I have learned is I can also start training or go to training schools here, and I don't have to get a visa, an education visa.
Okay.
So, for example, I already checked, as you know, I'm already a trained EMT. Now, I had done that emergency medical technician, guys who work in ambulances or maybe in the ER as a tech.
Right.
So I did that 3 years ago. I got the training 3 years ago back in the United States, and I've been wanting to do it since 2011, right? I've been wanting to get a farm in the middle of nowhere since 2011. So I'm slow and I can work at it. But I also wanted a private pilot's license. So I know I'm researching this. I know of at least 2 different places that have flight schools. Now, most places in the world, flight school is all in English. Okay.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, all of those pilots and all of those airplanes, at one point, they knew enough English to be able to communicate within certain parameters. So I don't need to take a language test. I'm waiting to see, because it's connected to university, do I need to be enrolled in a degree program, or can I take it separately? And if I can't, then I know that they have an associate's degree system, which is a 2-year program. Okay, then I'll have to think, do I really want it? Because then it comes with a private pilot's license, but 3 or 4 other certifications that go along with it.
Right.
Okay, maybe I'll do that. Now, again, because look, I've lived on the farm. I understand some of what I'm doing. Doesn't mean I got all of it down. There are organizations like WOOF, for example, where you can volunteer and you'll get food and you'll get trained about how to help these people run these farms, and whether they have solar panels or whether they have very sophisticated irrigation systems, or maybe they use drones. So to be certain, I'm not just going to sit around just watching YouTube videos. Oh no, Georgians, while Georgians are not known for being the most innovative among the former Soviet Republic people, they aren't bad. And there are plenty of places that speak enough English where I'm learning new opportunities every day about training in this, learning in that. So I'll certainly keep myself busy getting ready for Fiji also.
What are some of the opportunities you're seeing? Again, I'm talking about robotics, and I know I'm just using that as an example, but what are some of the opportunities that you're seeing?
Okay, so this is someplace where actually I was a bit skeptical about the use. Now, let me be clear, of robots on farms, especially when my father was talking about it. So with my father, sure, they had a small garden. The only things they really did commercially was honey and blueberries.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what are you going to do with robots? I mean, all right, maybe you can have a drone or something check the acidity of the soil. You can have it maybe check the water content and see if it needs more water, things like this. I was skeptical, among other things, of robots being used to, shake the bushes to collect the blueberries. Now, I've picked blueberries. Okay, yeah, it takes a god awful long time. All right. But having a robot do it at such an efficient rate, and how are you going to get all of them? But there's actually it can be really efficient. And it'd be better, of course, if you're using 3D printers to make your own stuff, or to be able to repair your own stuff on the fly. Because, especially like here in Georgia, you might not be anywhere near where you can order a piece be made.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
Any
if you go
other
into
opportunities?
outside of farming and robotics,
Yeah.
what do you look? Well, okay, so there's plenty of soft skill training available.
Okay. Such
Um,
as what? Like
I,
translation or what?
well, certainly translation, talking about conflict resolution, and a whole bunch of other really, highfalutin terms. God, I'm really sounding country right now.
Okay.
Uh,
And what are most of the Georgian people doing, like in terms of like what do you see like business wise? I mean, of course, there's little shops and stuff like that, but I mean, what are they sort of talking about or trying to do, push forward?
Well, again, I've only been here a week, so I haven't had real opportunity to get in contact with many Georgians. And I have with a language app called Hello Talk. It was introduced to me in Korea, and actually it's worked very well for me here in Georgia. I've met 4 or 5 people and had a lot of conversation about what they're doing.
It's a seeing a
Um,
resurgence. Hello Talk. I'm on there too, using. Learning Russian with that actually.
and it's great, for what it is. It's not bad. And so I'm in communication with a real estate lawyer, another person who works as a librarian at a university student who wants to go teach English in Estonia, and so on. And so anyway, uh, I think now the people on Hello Talk, one of the things is those demographics are going to be looking to maybe going abroad
Yeah.
or being more open to starting businesses. But I see a lot of just simple, even handicraft or just small things. I noticed even on weekdays when I'm walking by parks or churches, people line out with books that they're selling.
Yeah.
All right. Certainly clothes, tchotchkes of all kinds.
So I mean, you're just trying to. What's your timeline in terms of waiting until Fiji opens? Is it like you're willing to keep on bouncing around the world until Fiji actually opens, or is there sort of a time where you're like, you know what, this is not going to work?
Well, for me, as you know, I'm getting to my podcast, which is Fiji or Bust, making sundials hip again. No, that's still coming. See, what happened was in the interim, we haven't talked about this in a long time. In the interim, I worked with an American for a while who was a professional in making podcasts and started up, right? He was contracted to help. He was a consultant and helped start up some. And he asked me some very pointed questions about what I was doing and other things that really helped me focus on it. And it's just I haven't had the time or the facilities to be able to do it. Now, that may be something now that I can actually rent a full apartment and it's really cheap here and I can get set up here, I may come to do that.
You don't
Yes,
have
sir.
the space or the time, and yet you're on my
Remember,
podcast with
I had
headphones,
a two.
with that lighting, with that camera. Are you saying you're not giving me your best, sir? Is that what
You're
you're saying?
forgetting the headphones are 4 years old. That is a simple light from the ceiling.
Well, it's
Are
better
you
light than
kidding
last
me?
time. I'm not gonna lie. Last time was even more grainy, but this time
Well,
is a lot better.
that room didn't have a light in the ceiling. There were
Yeah.
only lamp lights.
Well, I think people would be interested in hearing your podcast about getting ready for Fiji. And I'm not gonna lie, if I saw you listed as, Fiji or bust, then I'd be like, yep, there's another American expat starting another business idea to go to a different country to leave the homeland on the glory that is the passport of the American people.
Oh, by the way, that's something I wanted to mention earlier,
Uh
and I
oh.
think I mentioned in our first podcast was that remember there are only 2 citizenships in the world where you are technically taxed on your foreign income: Eritrea
And
and the United States.
okay.
And so it doesn't matter if I haven't been in America since I was born. All right. If I carry an American passport, if I'm an American citizen, I must pay taxes if it's more than about $95,000 now. Okay.
Yeah,
The
but if you're
tax
making
may,
more
and
than
it's also,
$95,000, you can afford an accountant to do the
well,
math for you.
but it becomes more complicated because what happened was back after the last financial disaster back in '08, the Democrats kept on going on about, oh, the rich are moving money into foreign bank accounts and this and that. So they made it a requirement for banks if they want to be on the SWIFT system and an American opens an account, they must declare it and file papers with the IRS. The bank must. And so
Yeah, they track everything.
what was the consequence of that? People like me, people like you, so what did banks do? A lot of banks just decided, you know what? We will not work with Americans anymore. It has made life for Americans living abroad so much more difficult,
Which
except
that
for the very
whole
wealthy.
argument with the whole SWIFT system, that's sort of what Russia and China are going, why do we have to be part of this? Like, because what you're saying is like, if you open up and the bank has to report this all to the IRS, you know, a lot of people say a lot of things about state oversight in China and Russia. Well, if the United States government does that, and Canada basically does, mimics what the States does a lot of times, um, although our tax system is a little bit different. The banks have to report all the income that goes through the banks in Canada. It's like, isn't that state oversight by another name? That is state oversight. If the government says, banks, you have to report what people have in their bank accounts. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I kind of look at it that way and go, I don't know. China, Russia, are they that wrong in their approach to some of these banking issues? And what they're
I,
trying to set up is an alternative banking
I,
system that you don't have to go through SWIFT.
I'm all in favor of it. And so that's why, for example, I like the idea of cryptocurrencies. Again, earlier I was an American libertarian. So I was in those circles, okay, with Bitcoin at the very beginning, 10 years ago or whatever it was. I knew about it. And the
But
way that
did
it was
you buy
described to
any?
me, well, let's see, here was the thing, was the way it was described to me was, I want to explain the transformation in how Bitcoin was envisioned being used. It was going to be used to be able to use at the supermarket. And while I like the idea, I saw what was coming. In the end, I thought a couple of things. I thought it's a great idea because I don't want the government being able to track what I'm doing. But I think in the end, the government will shut it down and they will
Okay.
make their own.
So
And that
in
is
your belief of the currency, did you buy any?
no. I see that's another thing. No, I don't see. I don't deride people who do, but I also understand the people who don't.
And
And
so
I still
had
understand.
you, how much do you need for Fiji again? 250,000? Had you
Well, no, no, no,
bought
no. Well, no.
5 Bitcoins, you would
So
have
it's
your
two.
Fijian passport.
Well, so it was 250,000 Fijian dollars, which
Okay.
is about 125,000
Right. We did the
American.
math last time. I remember. Yes.
Now, but see, I don't. I almost never feel regret because as
You,
long as I
you can't.
see the thing is, see the thing for me is, did I make the best choices with what my motivations were and the knowledge I had at the time?
Yeah.
If I did, then maybe I don't like the consequences, but I can't blame myself because I acted with integrity to myself. No, I think the worst sin is for you to betray yourself. Okay,
Right.
that's Hamlet.
It's similar to I hear this all the time with people who are trading stocks. They hear that I trade stocks and like, oh, had you bought Amazon? I'm like, had you bought Amazon and you made $1,000 20 years ago, you would have sold. Not that you would not have held on to Amazon until just last week it closed at 3,400. It dipped down to 2,900 and back up or something like that. It's like you would first of all you had to know what Amazon was. That it's you had to take a gamble on its potential because there were other companies trying to do the same thing. How many failed, right? I mean, it was an internet.com company. It's so easy to say had you bought. Same with Bitcoin. Had you bought? I mean, it's nope. You can't go back and live that one again. It's that's like saying today that if you are so smart, then today you have identified and purchased what will make you wealthy 10 years from now. And for most people, honestly, it's going to be some store value of gold, their house, and then either their business or their job, their skills, basically. I mean,
Your
those are
skills.
your
Yes.
four things that you can rely on almost.
That's one thing that I have heard about from just about people from anywhere in the world, all sorts of different backgrounds. The most important investment they have made is in themselves. And
Yeah,
hopefully, because of all the education and their skills, they're able to recognize opportunities when they come.
yeah.
Right? That's it. That's the best you
And
can hope for.
one of those things. I mean, we are expats, you and I, and you're traveling all over the place. I mean, one of those things is being resilient and being adaptable to the situation. Which, let's face it, I mean, you've put yourself in an uncomfortable position. You're homeless, more or less, but at the same time, you are looking at these opportunities. You're looking at them and evaluating which ones are a good fit and which ones might not work out. I mean, yeah, I mean, it could be that had you stayed in South Korea in 10 years, the country will see a renaissance, or China, same thing. Or it could be like you know what? Maybe the reunification between North and South doesn't go as planned, and South Korea has other
Starts
issues, right?
glowing.
well, or same with like Dubai. I mean, it's I know that one of the places I still talk about is going to the Middle East, Dubai or Abu Dhabi. That would be the next step. I don't think I'd go back to Canada at this point, and that has nothing to do with the politics or anything. It's just in terms of, as you say, with looking around and seeing the diversity. I've noticed that for myself, in terms of being an expat, that's one of the things that humbles me a lot. Um, Although I can still get very worked up when things don't make sense to me, it's I mean, it's more, I don't know, I've found it a little bit more attractive. My days go a lot better when I can look out and experience something new rather than, you know, I guess just live in the same old neighborhood. But not saying that, and to be fair, it's not
No.
for everybody. It's not for everybody. And I certainly don't think a lot of people could do what you're doing. Just taking off and going, well, I don't know if it's going to work out. But I mean, you're giving it a shot, right?
Yeah, and I mean, so again, because as you know, I'm divorced, and because of my relationship with my ex-wife, I don't need to support my son, right? First, so I don't have any financial or familial obligations
Yeah,
as
that
such.
helps.
I
That
try, of
helps.
course, I try to maintain a relationship as well as I can with my son, of course, but there, I do what I can. I really do, and that's so I don't have that. Also, as you know, I've got a lot of gold and silver. And unless the internet, the whole banking system collapses, things go bad. I can, because of my contract and because of how my gold and silver is held, I can easily sell a couple 100 grams of gold if I need to at the drop of a hat. And I'm fine, right?
Well, but
Outside of my money in the bank.
so the question would be that if everything goes to shit and you have to sell your gold, what are you selling it into? What currency?
What am I going?
Yeah, no, you
Okay,
shave
so
off a
my
couple of
holdings.
100 grams, and like, what are you going to take for it in exchange for it? Take it Fijian
Oh no,
land
no.
or U.S. dollars?
Well, okay. So my gold and silver is being held in Singapore.
And it's
Okay.
priced in U.S. dollars. Yes,
So
gold
because of
trades
the
in
well,
U.S. dollars
well, sort of yes, sort of no.
or London. You
Um,
take your pick, but you bought it with basically American dollars through a bank.
well, certainly the company I would be selling the gold and silver to are American, unless, I mean, if I could go back to Singapore and then take physical custody of it,
Yeah.
I could do that too, and then sell it. And Singapore is actually a great place for that. I already, as you know, when I first came to Singapore, I already paid taxes, import taxes on it. So I pay no more taxes.
Right.
I sell it, I sell it. I don't have to declare anything. I have my tax paper that shows it. So the person who's buying it from me knows it. And I still got that. And I got an electronic company of it. I got everything. So that's not so much an issue. But that would be in the case of emergency. I mean, right now as it
Yeah.
is, I can't get into Fiji. Okay,
Can't
well, all
travel
right.
halfway around the world, yet you did a visa run to Dubai. I mean, what?
Well, Fiji doesn't allow anyone in, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, okay, here, if I want to go into Fiji, first I need to come on a yacht. All right. No
Yeah.
joke. I need to come on a yacht and I need to stay in the territorial waters after I arrive for 14 days. And then I can actually properly enter Fiji, assuming I have a visa to
Well,
enter also.
I'm not gonna lie, Danny. Of all people that I know and have met, I think I wouldn't be surprised that if in 6 to 9 months we are talking again, and you are on a yacht or in a marina or somewhere water ish, with a new stamp, maybe photoshopped or not, in your passport, and you are reporting about how you couldn't get your podcast up and running because, oh, well, after our last conversation, I bought a yacht. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of see that happening. Uh, all right, so we've covered a lot of ground today, quite a bit. I'm sure people are going to find it very interesting. Any final thoughts before I let you go on and get on with your day, which is what, Sunday afternoon already in your place, right?
It's a quarter after 1 here.
Right on. All right, so I mean, what else
Um,
do people need to know?
I think that I understand. All right, this is going to go back to me being me. I understand why people believe they need government and overall arching plans in their life to help regulate things. I'm not going to argue that point.
Right.
What I will say is that if you consider the amount of flexibility that is offered, like in Dubai, the fact that you can just rent a partition makes it possible so that people who earn very little can still live there, and the cost of living is so low that they can make themselves, that they can have success. A lot of them go there so that they can make their lives better or send money home.
Right.
Whereas, like New York City, for example, you couldn't rent just right, have 18 people or 16 people in an apartment. No, the max is probably like 4. It depends on square footage. Oh, because you must have this. Oh, because you must do that. A lot of the costs in the West that we have in industrialized countries, okay, we make it so that it's hard to live. Okay, do you want to live on a partition? No. Okay, that's fine. But they do. Do they have quality water at home? Good enough. Okay, they need to boil before they cook, but so do a lot of places in the world, even in the West. Do they have access to reasonable medical health care? Yeah, they do. They can go to a restaurant and spend $2 on a decent meal
But is that two
because they
dollars
don't
a
have
lot
so
to
much.
them? Yeah. Is that $2 a
And
lot though?
um, not okay to be like the UAE. My guess is the minimum salary is probably just like 300 or so dollars a month. So they may not be doing it often, but the other primary foods that you might have, lentils, beans, rice, even fruit, basic fruits that they have to import aren't so expensive. So when we talk about how the businesses are evil or other things like that, they're not paying them enough. Well, the cost of living might be because of government regulation and taxes. So anyway, if you're willing to find a place, you're willing to do research, you might find places that are cheaper, more in tune with how you want to live. Is it risky? Yes. Is it for everybody, especially if you've got family or monetary obligations? You have physical assets in countries that you can't move. It may not be for you, right? There are 330 million Americans. Before the coronavirus started, roughly, the US Census said roughly 1% of Americans lived abroad. Only 1%, only 3 million Americans bouncing
Yeah.
around. That's not a lot.
That's yeah. You bring up some good points. I mean, I'm sort of thinking about you're traveling on the American passport. You haven't rejected that just yet, so it's still
Well,
the gift that
I
keeps
don't
on
have other
giving.
citizenship.
Right.
And
And
also,
this is you can't not have citizenship, right? You can't declare yourself because any if you tried to do that in any country, they'd be like, "Get the fuck out of here!" I mean, they're going to take you to the airport, charge you for the plane ticket, and send you back.
and after the corona, right? So what happened was, say 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, it was a fairly simple formality of declaring that you're no longer an American citizen. There were some forms to fill out, and you'd have to go to an American embassy, and you'd have to show that you have citizenship for another country. But otherwise, you pay your fee, you fill out the paperwork, and that was it.
What was the
A
fee?
few years
It was
ago,
like $100,
I
wasn't
don't
it?
remember, it was a few $100s,
Yeah.
but then it went up like 30 or 40 times. And they said, oh, well, you have to make an appointment. You have to speak to somebody at the embassy. And get this, they could still decline,
Yeah, it's
right?
they won't
And they
let you
don't even
reject it
say,
anymore.
yeah, seriously, they don't even have to say, oh, well, we want your tax papers for this set of years. We want your bank records. We want this or that. No, they can just say, no, we don't accept it. And now with the coronavirus, a lot of Americans' embassies are still closed. The few that are, limited services. And guess what? Declaring you don't want to be an American citizen, that's not one of the services they're currently offering. So
You can't even reject your passport, your citizenship just yet. All right, Denny. It's been an informative conversation. It's been fantastic to see you. I'm glad you look a lot happier than you did last time. I'm not going to lie, but also better lighting too. So something must be going great. That's good to see. I hope you're well, and I hope you stay well and stay safe out in the middle of the world, basically. Well, according to the map that most people see, Georgia. So that's good. Well,
great place.
thank you very much for taking the time and enlightening us, and a lot of information there. All right, cheers, dude. Hope you're
Thank
well.
you.
Take care. We'll talk again.
Yep.
Hey,
See you
bye bye.
later. Bye.
And that was episode number 25 of my podcast. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I know that we covered a lot in that conversation. It's always been great to talk to Denny. He's one of these guys that I was thinking in this conversation that we need people like him. We need people like him who are willing to take that risk, to leave where they were planted, and to, basically leave, go away, and find out, see some new places and whatnot, and do the research for us other people who might not be, or some other people who might not be as willing to take that risk. The fact that he's taken that risk and left the United States, and has traveled that far. I know some people might criticize him for traveling, but I mean, he's out there looking for business opportunities, looking for opportunities, and trying out some new things. So I hope everything goes as well as it can go well given the situation. Thanks again for joining me. I'll have full show notes on my website, stevensersky.com. Have a great day. We'll talk again. Bye bye.